part of a charity concert hosted by the CME Group during their championship tour. All proceeds from this event will be donated to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital.
Always blown
That's so
away
cool.
by them. They are so
Don't they
good.
just make you happy, bring a smile
They
to your
do,
face? Right?
Sylvia. That's all for Fox 32 News at noon.
Well, news continues on Chicago Live. We'll see you back here at 4.
Next up.
Through 4 p.m. I'm Anita Blanton in Studio 32 with you. Let's go over some of the things that you can expect here in this first hour with plenty more to come here. So environmentalists are calling on Governor Pritzker to support state-level legislation in order to save Illinois' wetlands and clean water. The federal policy manager of the Illinois Environmental Council is going to be joining me to talk about new federal rollbacks of clean water protection, something that really, obviously got their attention. We'll talk about what that should look like here in Illinois and what it can mean for me and you specifically if you live here in Illinois. Plus, we're awaiting a press conference here in Chicago with the Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle, other lawmakers and advocates, immigration partners to announce the county's support for expanding the Public Defender's Immigration Division. That should be happening at any point in time. And speaking of things that should be happening any minute now, there are several hearings in Washington, D.C. that all kind of connect back here to Chicago. We're going to dip into them where we can live. The Senate Commerce Subcommittee, they're having a hearing titled Flying on Empty, How Shutdowns Threaten Air Safety, Travel, and the Economy. Of course, O'Hare and Midway were both on that first list when the government shut down, so we should have Chicago mentioned in that. A Senate Judiciary Committee hearing called Ice Under Fire, the Radical Left's Crusade Against Immigration Enforcement. Obviously, Operation Midway Blitz did a number on our area, and we're going to start with House Judiciary Committee. This is a subcommittee hearing on restoring law and order in high-crime U.S. cities. So let's go ahead and listen in here.
So, I would say at this point, though, that because it's unconstitutional, I would urge my Republican colleagues to oppose this bill. I would urge all of my colleagues to oppose this bill. And I would note that Salerno was written by Chief Justice Rehnquist, no liberal advocate, and Justice Scalia supported it as well. This is a provision that has key safeguards that are excluded by the way this is drafted. It has to be revised. I oppose it even if you do the revision piece because I think it violates the rights of the District of Columbia to make their own determinations. But at a minimum, please send constitutional law forward. And with that, I yield back.
Gentleman reserves. Recognize the gentleman from Kentucky.
Reserve.
Reserved. Gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to yield 7 minutes to the gentlelady from the District of Columbia, Congresswoman Norton.
So ordered.
I thank the gentleman for yielding to me, and I strongly oppose this bill, which amends the District of Columbia pretrial release and detention law. Last year, violent crime in D.C. was down 35%. Reaching an over 30-year low. This year, violent crime in D.C. is down 38% compared with the same period last year. I suspect most of my Republican colleagues do not know that D.C.'s longstanding pretrial release and detention law is substantially the same as the longstanding federal pretrial release and detention law, or that the same well-respected federal agency provides pretrial services for both local and federal trial courts in D.C. This bill requires, in the case of certain crimes, pretrial detention based solely on a charge and financial conditions for pretrial release. However, mandatory pretrial detention based solely on a charge is unconstitutional, and financial conditions for pretrial release criminalize poverty. Neither D.C. nor federal law requires pretrial detention or financial conditions for pretrial release. Laws permit each. Under both D.C. and federal law, pretrial release and detention are based on a judge's assessment of a defendant's risk of not appearing in court and danger to the community. In contrast, 18 states, the majority of which are red states, have a constitutional right to bail, meaning except in capital cases, a defendant cannot be detained pre-trial based solely on flight of risk or dangerousness. Pretrial detention is a severe restriction on the ability of an individual who is presumed innocent. This bill requires detention for the period before trial based solely on a charge with no adversary hearing. That is unconstitutional. The Due Process Clause of the Constitution requires an adversary hearing to detain a defendant for the period before trial. In 1987, the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality of the federal pretrial release and detention law. In its ruling, the court stressed the law's procedural protections for defendants. Chief Judge Rehnquist said, in our society, liberty is the norm, and detention prior to trial or without trial is the carefully limited exception. We hold that the provisions for pretrial detention in the Bail Reform Act of 1984 fall within that carefully limited exception. The Act authorizes the detention prior to trial of arrestees charged with serious felonies who are found after an adversary hearing to pose a threat to the safety of the individuals or of the community, which no condition of release can dispel. The numerous procedural safeguards detailed above must attend this adversary hearing. Studies show that whether a jurisdiction requires financial conditions for pretrial release has no effect on the crime rates of that jurisdiction. Instead, even small financial conditions for pretrial release often force poor defendants to remain in jail, which can cost them their jobs and housing and leads to more convictions and longer sentences. The over 700,000 D.C. residents, the majority of whom are black and brown, are capable and worthy of governing themselves. If residents do not like how members of D.C.'s local legislature vote, residents can vote them out of office or pass a ballot measure. That is called democracy. If D.C. residents do not like how members of Congress vote on local D.C. matters, residents cannot vote them out of office. That is the antithesis of democracy. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record letters opposing this bill from D.C. Mayor, the entire D.C. Council, and the D.C. Attorney General, all of whom were elected by D.C. residents. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this undemocratic and paternalistic bill. It is long past for Congress to pass the D.C. statehood bill.
Without
Free
objection.
D.C.
Without objection. Gentleman from Kentucky.
Further speakers and prepared to close.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from California.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Congressman Walkinshaw.
Recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to H.R. 5214, which erodes the self-governance of the District of Columbia. 2 months ago, Mr. Speaker, I was a local government official not far from here in Fairfax County. And in the 6 years I spent in that role, I learned that the people best positioned to make decisions about the local policies in their local communities are local leaders, after listening to that local community. And my colleagues across the aisle who are advocating for these bills, with due respect, know very little about the District of Columbia, know very little outside of perhaps their walk from their apartment in Navy Yard to this Capitol complex. They don't know the history, the neighborhoods, the communities, the challenges that folks in the district are facing. And while my colleagues espouse the virtues of self-governance, they simultaneously advocate for bills like this that strip self-governance from 700,000 Americans. In 1973, Congress passed the Home Rule Act to grant to the inhabitants of the district powers of local self-government. And this bill is just one of many in this House that erode those powers to help President Trump consolidate power over our nation's capital. Meanwhile, the American people are confronting crisis after crisis that demand action from this Congress. Our national economy is struggling under President Trump's leadership. Tariffs are driving up prices. Looming health care cuts are about to result in skyrocketing premiums for Americans across the nation. In the midst of this, how does the majority choose to spend its time? By meddling in D.C.'s local affairs and further disenfranchising 700,000 tax-paying Americans. I strongly oppose this bill and encourage my colleagues to vote no. I yield back.
Gentleman from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to respond to our new colleague here who hasn't worked in Congress very long, this bill passed constitutional muster with the House Legislative Council, CRS, and various outside stakeholders. None of our Democrat colleagues brought up these concerns during the markup, but let me say this. For those of us who have worked here in Washington, D.C. for...
All right, so we were listening into a hearing on for the Restoring Law and Order in High Crime U.S. Cities there. Kind of switched the feed over to the First Lady. She is, it looked like in a daycare right now, and you can see her with some of the children there. While we work to get some information on why she is in this setting today, let me just tell you a little bit about what we were hearing there. We popped in on the tail end of a conversation about policing by constitutional law. D.C. Congresswoman Eleanor Norton stood up to speak about there is a bill that would amend D.C.'s pretrial release and detention law. And she says that this criminalizes poverty when poverty in the District of Columbia is at a 30-year low. Now, we let that ride because as you're listening into that, remember we talked about the fact that so many of the hearings today kind of circle back directly or indirectly to what's happening here in Illinois and in the city of Chicago. Much of what she mentioned kind of goes back to the Safety Act here in Illinois that has been, it's received cheers and jeers, if you will, for many different reasons when it comes to pretrial release and detention. And how that maybe disproportionately affects Black and brown people especially, but also if it's maybe too lenient and allows people who should be in custody back out into the system where they may be able to commit more crime. So it's been debated quite a bit here in our state. There was also a Virginia representative who stood up to talk about another bill that he says would erode self-governance of the District of Columbia. But coming back around to that amendment there for the bill for pretrial release in D.C. and detention, of course, this Restoring Law and Order in High Crime U.S. Cities will also talk about, where the National Guard has been deployed and the cities that the Trump administration would still like to deploy the National Guard. And again, if you think about here in Illinois, there were National Guard members who came from the state of Texas. There was about 200 of them. There were also members who were called up, about another 300 or so that were called up from right here in our state, but they were not allowed to actually be deployed on the streets of Chicago, in and around Chicago. So that was caught up in federal litigation, and they weren't able to go any further with that. But of course, in Washington, D.C., they were, because D.C. being the District of Columbia, not being a state, which goes back into that second part of the conversation that we listened into there, they don't have as much of a say, if you will, on that particular matter. So federal guards for national troop members were able to be in the District of Columbia for about 2.5 months or so. Now, the Trump administration would argue that that crime did go down during that time. Downtown D.C. and a little bit further out, that crime did go down during that time. But the mayor of D.C., as well as many others who are top officials in D.C., have pointed to that 30-year low mark, that they were already trending down, similar to here in Chicago. The crime was already trending down, albeit never at a zero, still trending down. So at a 30-year low point, they're fighting back against this bill that would amend pretrial release and detention there in Washington, D.C. Now, we're not going to listen into that full hearing, of course, but again, we do expect things to either indirectly or directly come back to the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. So we were just listening in for a few moments there. Sorry about the switch of that feed right in the middle of what was being said, but it's 1:16 right now. Let's take a quick break and we'll see where we're going from here. All right, everyone, it's just about 1:20 right now, and Britain's domestic spy service, it's called MI5. They are now warning lawmakers in Britain that China's intelligence services are posing as recruiters to target people who work in Parliament. In an effort to collect sensitive information, they say, on the UK to gain strategic advantage, they believe that China and their actors have been using websites like LinkedIn to try to build relationships with parliamentarians there. So I want to bring in former FBI cybersecurity agent Todd Carroll to talk a little bit more about what we see there and the parallels here in the U.S. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
Had you heard about this situation? What was your reaction, if so?
Not surprised. Obviously, the Chinese government is looking at any type of avenues or areas of approach to gaining information for their use.
So when you say any, how concerned should people in the U.S. be? I mean, I know so many people who may not like Facebook or Instagram or X, but they will use LinkedIn.
Right. Right. So, I mean, LinkedIn's not safe as anything else is, right? It's not more safe just because it's LinkedIn. It's used by professionals, right? So we're all concerned as users of all these social media platforms of, scammers, people trying to get our personal data, trying to take advantage of us. And it's no different that, the Chinese intelligence services or any other intelligence services are using sites like LinkedIn or other professional sites to target, professionals for the information that they may know, whether it's business-wise or if it's, for this instance, for those associated with the UK government.
So let's see. The security minister told Parliament, let me speak plainly. These are his words. Let me speak plainly. This activity involves a covert and calculated attempt by a foreign power to interfere with our sovereign affairs in favor of its own interests, and this government will not tolerate it. What has our government here in the U.S. done to try to protect from these very same types of things?
Well, obviously working with, businesses, doing similar types of alerts, telling them when they may be targeted or to look for those types of areas where, you may be targeted, right? When I ran the cyber program in Chicago for a long time, I used to tell my agents, and we had a saying that, China will steal the beach 1 grain of sand at a time, meaning that, all information they can collect could be important and valuable to them, whether it's now or in the future. And, we look at what LinkedIn's about, right? LinkedIn is about building relationships. And that's all they're trying to do right now is build relationships with people that may be of use to them later.
Yeah, who knows at what point in time they may need it. But the Chinese embassy, I want to say this, in London, dismissed the claims. They said they're pure fabrication and malicious slander. But let's just go with what has been said at this point in time and the general feeling, the general sentiment of how to protect people when we're in so many different places online.
Right. I mean, it's the same whether you're on LinkedIn or you're on Facebook or you get an email, right? You have to question why. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. No one's going to call you and offer you, a lot of money for writing a paper or doing something that's unusual that isn't coming through, or a great job interview, right? I have that happen all the time. Oh, we looked at your profile and this sounds like, you're perfect for this job. Click on this link, right? You have to question those things. And it's the world we live in nowadays, whether it's, any type of social media platform or even your email. You have to question, why is this? Should I click on it? And is this real? And you have to do your due diligence before you do something further.
Are there some other red flags that especially professionals should be looking out for about, something that could be linked to China?
Professional, I mean, it's unusual. I get these all the time, right? I'll wake up in the morning, I'll look at my emails or I'll look at my LinkedIn, and somebody in the US will post a job offer for me or ask me to connect. But it's like from 3 in the morning. Right? It doesn't make sense. It's who's sending that. It's, there's always maybe some red flags. And once again, we have to trust our gut. trust our best interest, our experience, and question, is this real? Is it not? And make sure you ask the questions before you click on something, before you give information that maybe you shouldn't, and ask those directed questions before you dive into something that, may not be what it appears.
Red flags are important to look out for, but let's just say someone didn't know them before hearing you right now.
Yep.
What if you fall victim? What do you do then?
Well, the best thing you can do is obviously, call the FBI, let them know as it's probably happening to others so that they can notify others. Take a look at, it depends on what you've given up, right? Have you given up access to, did you click on something? Are you concerned about your accounts? Change what's important to you, right? My bank accounts are the most important thing to me. Do I change those? Do I have multi-factor authentication? Do I have those other things on my computer that I need to change in order to protect myself? Is somebody compromised me on Facebook? And now we all know somebody that has happened to this week, right? Hey, don't click on this. This isn't me.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody got my account, right? You don't want to be that next person, but you're looking out for those different areas. So changing passwords, monitoring obviously your credit if it was something involving where you think your personal information got out. In those different areas, you want to monitor to make sure that you're not a victim, or maybe you didn't go far enough in order for them to victimize you.
What responsibility do social media sites like LinkedIn have to us to protect us from state-backed influence or recruitment attempts?
They all have a responsibility to a point, and they'll say they will. Meta has come out and said that about their platforms. LinkedIn, all the majors have. But it's very difficult for them to do that because what's the whole purpose of social media? It's for us to reach out, to connect with one another, to share information, to share things, and they're just taking advantage of, right? And it's a cheap way for China to attack, whether it's us here in the United States or parliament figures in the UK. Hey, it's a lot easier to send out 20 connection requests versus getting on an airplane and trying to bump into somebody at a coffee shop, right? It's just the way that espionage is done nowadays, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds kind of like a convenience fee, if you will. But to that end, do you just see more of this happening in the future?
Oh, absolutely. It's going to be where it's the path of least resistance. It's, before it was how do I compromise somebody? How do I get them to maybe cross that line when you're working intelligence operations, right? How do I get them to give up something that they may not want to give up voluntarily? And it's going to be that, whether it's social media today, via using social engineering techniques, making people feel comfortable until they can cross a line or do something or click on something or whatever it may be. It's unfortunately, it's the LinkedIns of today, and tomorrow it may be something else. But it's always going to continue, and it's going to be where we are, and it's going to be where people are talking and meeting one another.
Yeah. How common do you think it is already for foreign governments like China to possibly approach Americans in this type of way?
Oh, it's happened. I mean, obviously for the UK, for MI5 to go this far, we have to read between the lines, and we have to look at why are they doing this? And obviously they're not giving out everything, and obviously they probably uncovered something that's even bigger. But would I be shocked if other countries are trying to develop relationships with people in the government or former government or those at major corporations that have information, or those who have access to that information? And that's where social media is today's battleground, whether it's thinking one way or influencing the way people feel about events that are happening in Chicago, let's say, all the way to information that they're trying to grab that may help them down the road. So it's happening now. I'm sure it's happening more than we even think about. But that's where people are, making those connections and trying to extract information from each other.
Yeah, and I guess just on a final note, can you speak to the broader implications here that may jump out at you, or even if there are some type of diplomatic consequences for things like this?
Well, if you look at the other things that are going on right now in the UK, right? The Chinese are seeking permission for a much larger embassy. I remember when I worked in the DC area, anytime a new embassy went up, it was a tit for tat, right? if you give us this, we'll allow the Americans to build one in Leningrad or whatever it may be. And it was always a back and forth, and it was always about leverage. And knowledge is power, and power obviously is leverage when you're in negotiations. And if you know what your adversary, whether it's on a day-to-day basis or going to buy a car, if you have more information than the other person does, you have the upper hand in those types of negotiations. And right now in the UK, you have the two British nationals, their cases were just dropped by the British government because they couldn't consider, or the British were not willing to call China an enemy of the state. And you got the embassy issue going on. So it's, a lot of it's a tit for tat. It's a back and forth. It's negotiations. It's a power struggle. Don't say this, say that. You know, we're going to call out some of your, intelligence tactics, et cetera, that are going on all the time.
Todd Carroll, former FBI cybersecurity agent, we certainly appreciate you sharing just a bit of your knowledge with us. I could tell there's so much going on in your brain. I shudder to think of all the things that you have seen.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Take care. All right, it's 1:30 right now, and there are several stories that we want to talk with TMZ about that they're covering today. I want to bring in producer Devin Rawl. Thank you so much for your time. Devin, can you hear me? It's Anita Blanton in Chicago.
Yeah, of course. Great to talk to you. Can you hear me?
Yes, great speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time. Let's start here with this case against singer David. And I know he spells his name D4VD, but it is pronounced David, correct?
Correct. David, that's how it's stylized, but David Burke. So obviously this has been a big story for us in LA. They discovered a 13-year-old body in David's Tesla trunk back in September on the 8th, and she had actually been missing. And so essentially we have a big update on the case. So for the longest time, it's been 2 months now that they found her body. A lot of people had suggested, they found the body in David's trunk. How is this guy not being looked at as a suspect? There's also some allegations that he was possibly dating or in some type of relationship with Celeste. So you would imagine, he's the main suspect. LAPD has, up until this point, really said they have no, publicly at least, have been saying that they have no suspect. So yesterday we got some information that internally in the LAPD, yes, they are in fact considering David a suspect in this crime. They're looking at this like it's a homicide. They've been waiting for the medical examiner to get back with the toxicology so they can actually have the determination of how she died first. But at least internally, they are looking at David as a suspect, and they are looking at this as a homicide, and they have reason to believe that there might be other people involved who helped him carry this out. Okay, and they've searched his home. What did they find? So they searched his home, I want to say like a month ago, maybe a little longer, a month and a half ago. And what they did was they took a bunch of, electronic devices. They checked the drains for blood. They did a full sweep of his entire house. We don't know exactly what they found on these electronic devices, like computers and whatnot. We just know that they were taken. But I would imagine by now, they subpoenaed his phone records. I'm sure they've subpoenaed the records for the Tesla. Because another big update in the case that we found out yesterday is that for whatever reason, they're looking into a time in spring of 2025 where David traveled to a remote area in Santa Barbara, for multiple hours late at night. And we're not exactly sure what this means. All we're told for now is that this is a big key to the case that cops are looking into, which I imagine that they got either from the Tesla records or maybe his phone records. So I didn't know this David guy until this story started to really populate. I have a lot of questions where he's concerned, because what I'm seeing online is that people are saying he kind of talked about possibly this case, what ended up becoming a case, in some of his music. Yeah, totally. So I wasn't super familiar with this guy's music, but he is extremely popular, especially with the younger generation. I mean, he played at Coachella, I believe it was last year. He was one of the acts there. So yeah, to your point, his music is very kind of emotional, very dark, and he has a lot of visuals he uses in his music videos that is quite gory. At one point, he was selling merch that had, fake blood on it. Obviously, these aren't things that make, someone guilty of a crime, but when you look back on everything that went down and his music kind of echoing, things that people can draw parallels to the case, it's definitely very eerie for sure, to say the least.
And I mean, the most eerie thing of all has to be this young woman's age. This isn't an 18-year-old even. Was she 15? Is that right?
She was 13. She had just turned, I believe, it was either 13 or the day after they found her body would have been her 14th birthday. But yeah, she's underage, very young. Obviously, she was from another part of LA. It's about 60 miles outside of LA, a place called Lake Elsinore, and she came from a family out there who she had ran away multiple times. We had heard about a lot of calls to service to her house. But at least, with the LAPD now saying that they are, looking into David as the suspect, you would have to imagine the parents are at least feeling like maybe they're going to get some type of closure, because obviously their daughter had been missing, and then they find out, that her body was decomposing in this David Singer's car.
It's just horrible. It really is horrible, even though we don't even have all the details. I don't know how it could get better, if you will, but at one point her parents did make some type of statement, at least her mother, correct?
Yeah, so very early on in this story, we actually had gotten a tip that because what happened was the body was found in David's car, but they hadn't released at least publicly identified, who it was, just that it was a very small, based off of the size, they believed it was, a young teen, and that it was a female. And we had actually gotten a tip that it was possibly this girl, Celeste Rivas, who had been missing out of Lake Elsinore for over a year. And we got a tip that she had allegedly been, possibly dating David or was in some type of relationship with him. And so we, reached out because there were missing posters for Celeste that were posted on Facebook. So at the time we had reached out and spoken to the mother, who had confirmed she hadn't at that point heard from LAPD, but the tattoo, she had matching tattoo with David on her finger, which they had, at that time they had released that she had this tattoo, and the mom did confirm to us that, she hadn't seen her daughter in over a year, and that she did have this matching tattoo. And then turns out she ended up being they have released that she was the body they found in the car.
Oh my goodness. Okay, just a few more questions for you on this particular thing. How is David's team responding to the investigation?
They're not. So early on, we did get an initial statement from a rep saying that, he was, because he was on tour actually when this story broke, somewhere in the Midwest, I believe, but that he was aware of the body being found in his car, and that he was cooperating with the LAPD. But that was obviously when the story initially broke. And since then, we really haven't heard much from his side. No one has seen him. We obviously reached out to people in his camp yesterday before we published the story about him being a suspect, and we never heard anything back. So no, we have no idea exactly what his cooperation is with LAPD at this point, and no one's seen him. So no one really knows where he's at.
Well, that answered my next two questions. So we don't know whether he's cooperating, and we don't know where he is.
No, I mean, if you know, let me know. But yeah, as far as on our end, no one has seen him since he canceled his tour. And as far as his cooperation with the LAPD, it doesn't seem like he's cooperating, but we don't know to what level.
Devin, this is just horrible. Please continue to keep us updated. We appreciate your reporting on that. I do want to ask you before I let you go also about this mysterious death of a teen on a Carnival cruise ship. What are the details there?
Yeah, another really sad story. So this Anna Kepner, she's an 18-year-old. She was found dead on November 8th on a Carnival cruise ship, and it's been kind of mysterious as to what led up to her death. I know the FBI is investigating, and essentially nothing was really known how she died, what they were looking into, if they had any suspects, any of that stuff. Really, very little information has come out about this case in the last week. But there was a big development because so she was on this cruise with her father, her stepmom, and I believe some of her stepmother's kids. So the stepmom is currently in a completely separate case away from, what's going on with Anna's investigation. It's actually a child custody case. Oh. And so she recently filed a request to delay a court hearing in the custody case. And she's claiming the reason that she's delaying it is because she's saying she cannot testify because she's been informed by the FBI and her attorneys that a criminal case might be initiated on one of her children. So I don't want to speculate, but obviously by her, the stepmom was on the cruise. She's claiming that one of her kids might be the subject of an investigation, and that's the reason she's giving the court as to why she can't testify in a court into this case that has nothing to do with Anna's investigation.
There is so much to that. Wow. And a housekeeping worker found her body under the bed in the room.
Yes, correct. And so in one of the cabins, but besides that, I think a lot of questions are unanswered as far as, what was the cause of death? Was this a homicide? Was this, just a drug overdose? No one knows at this point, and the FBI and the medical examiner's office haven't revealed any details that would, lead us to believe that this is, maybe if there's any foul play involved, I guess, at all. So I guess we shall see. But the court filing by the stepmom definitely points in the direction that possibly someone in the family is going to be a part of, some type of criminal investigation, which is an interesting detail, or wrinkle, I should say, to the story.
Yeah. All right. Devin, thank you so much for your time. We'll keep looking for updates in both of these cases. Very, very sad for both of these young ladies. Thank you.
Super, super sad, but yeah, great speaking with you, and hopefully we'll have some updates on both soon.
All right. Thank you so much. It's 1:41. Let's take a quick break. 1:43 right now, and environmentalists are calling on Governor Pritzker to support state-level legislation in order to save Illinois' wetlands and clean water. I want to bring in now a representative from the federal policy manager of the Illinois Environmental Council now to talk a little bit about what's going on, these new rollbacks that just went into play. Kate Caldwell, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so this announcement was just made about the rollbacks. Explain to us what that looks like.
Yeah, so what we're talking about here is called WOTUS, or the formal name is Waters of the United States. And so essentially this is the foundation of the Clean Water Act. And this definition is determining which rivers, streams, wetlands, and other water features are going to be federally protected. So as you may know, back in 2023, the Supreme Court's Sackett versus EPA decision actually forced EPA and the Army Corps to narrow these protections, specifically requiring wetlands to have a continuous surface connection to navigable waters. And so this past Monday, what we saw was that the agencies actually released a new definition that excludes isolated wetlands, ephemeral streams, ditches, and prior converted cropland. And so the administration here, they are framing this as clarity with this definition, but in reality, it's actually stripping millions of acres of wetlands and countless small streams of federal safeguards. So this rollback here, it has very serious consequences. Wetlands and streams, they are our nature's filtration systems and flood buffers. So without these protections, Illinois communities, we're going to face higher flood risks, more polluted drinking water, and honestly, a degraded wildlife habitat.
And of course, I think when I saw this, I immediately thought about Trump Tower, Chicago, agreeing to comply with the Clean Water Act, but that was after litigation going back and forth to a tune of like $4.8 million, I believe, that they had to pay. So then are you surprised that we're seeing this in a Trump presidency?
Honestly, I'm not surprised. This isn't the first rollback, specifically federal rollback, that we have seen. We've seen different SCOTUS decisions that have came out, so it's not surprising, but it is disappointing because Illinois, in our state, we've already lost around 90% of our wetland acreage due to development and destructive human activities. So this is just another example or another way that the Trump administration is furthering their harm of our most vulnerable communities.
So then let me ask you, in terms of, you're pushing Governor Pritzker to do some new things. What can he do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love that you asked that. So one specific coalition that has been working on this issue is the Protect Illinois Waters Coalition. And they've been working with our Illinois leaders to actually pass two companion bills. That's HB 3596 that was introduced by Representative Moeller and SB 2401 that was introduced by State Senator Ellman. And so this legislature is protecting our wetlands, right? But it hasn't moved forward because of Illinois Department of Natural Resources. And so what we need is for Governor Pritzker to kind of step in and actually exclaim like his support, because that's crucial. And so essentially we're calling on Pritzker to say, hey, we need you to lead. When the federal government is lacking, we need states like Illinois to actually step up to protect our wetlands for future generations to come.
Yeah, when you say that we've already lost 90% of our original wetlands, obviously that takes a long time to happen. So what has been your reception at other times that you've been fighting for things environmentally with Governor Pritzker?
Yeah, and I think my reception is that we're going to continue to push. We're going to continue to contact our lawmakers. We're going to continue to respond to things that we're seeing right now with the WOTUS ruling. We are willing and open to have those conversations with the governor, with his administration. But we want to be clear. Illinois is one of 23 states without a state-level wetlands permitting program. And according to a recent analysis that was already done, up to 72% of Illinois' remaining wetlands, which is more than 700,000 acres, could lose federal protection. So honestly, we want to keep having these conversations. We want to push our administration, and we want to continue to, put pressure on the governor as well to step up.
Yeah, but when I say, what has his reception been like when you all have had conversations before? Has he been receptive to your ideas? Has he put forth some type of legislation in the past, or other lawmakers that put forth the legislation and he signed off on other legislation that was substantial from an environmental perspective?
Yeah, I think the governor has definitely been receptive, especially when it comes to us pushing for environmental legislation. When it comes to wetlands specifically, that's still a work in progress. That's still a bill that we're going to continue to push in the next General Assembly. But when it comes to other environmental laws that we have advocated, that we have supported, even on the flip side of environmental laws that have been harmful, he's definitely been receptive. He's definitely taking our messages, our communication, our meetings. He's definitely taking them into consideration and also communicated with other agencies like IDNR, IEPA as well.
Okay, so what do you think is, I mean, if people kind of get lost in some of the acronyms and some of the terms here, what is the most important thing that you think viewers should understand about this entire situation?
Yeah, so I think the main thing is that wetlands improve water quality. They provide important flood control, they protect our groundwater, they preserve endangered habitats, and many more. The main thing here is that water quality should not be a partisan issue. Everyone deserves access to safe, clean drinking water, whether that's for recreation or whether that's for their homes. And so the message here is that the impacts and the consequences are going to far be more disastrous and more negative for our most vulnerable communities. So this particular ruling that EPA has just released, it's harmful. There is nothing positive about this specific ruling. And we need to do more. We need to step up. We're calling on our state leaders, we're calling on our state administration to realize that what the federal government is doing is not helping our communities. But here in Illinois, we have the power to stand up. We have the power to make legislation and pass legislation that helps our communities and steps in when the federal government is lacking.
You talked about most vulnerable communities. What are some of the maybe most vulnerable areas for this work and that would be affected especially by this rollback in Illinois?
Yeah, so I think our regions in Illinois that are probably most at risk from the negative impacts, whether it's from climate change, whether it's from flooding without wetlands protection, look at Moline, look at Rock Island, Burlington region near the Lower Rock River. You even have the Peoria metropolitan area that's surrounding the Illinois River, specifically going down to East St. Louis, Cahokia Heights, that have had wastewater and sewage structure issues. Those regions that are near, the Missouri and the Mississippi rivers, the Cape Girardeau and Cairo area, all of those that are near, like the Ohio River, for example.
Mm-hmm. And which communities would lose the most if there is a tightening of protections?
Well, I don't want to narrow it to just one specific type of community because you can see those same issues in Chicago as you would downstate. But when I think about most impacted, I think about those that are downstate. I think about those that are closest to our rivers and our waterways.
Very interesting stuff here. Is there any timeline on any of this? I mean, where things stand right now or what you all are hoping to do moving forward?
Yeah, so the ruling was just released this past Monday. There is a 45-day public comment period where organizations, individuals can submit a public comment expressing their opposition to this ruling. And so within those 45 days, the Illinois Environmental Council, we do plan on, submitting a public comment. We also plan on connecting with our partners and our affiliates as well, encouraging them to use their voice as well. During that same time, we also hope to hear a response from the governor to see, what his thoughts are and how the state plans to lead during this moment as well.
Yeah, and of course, as we're looking at governmental agencies, kind of pointing the finger at who's doing what or not doing what do we as Illinoisans, what do we as residents need to be doing differently?
Yes, I think the first is definitely educating ourselves. So as we talked about earlier, not many of us even know what WOTUS stands for. Some of us probably haven't even heard of what Waters of the United States is. Some of us haven't heard what a wetland is. So I think education is extremely important, but also finding community, finding those that are doing this advocacy work like the Illinois Environmental Council. We're always open and ready to serve as a resource to educate our partners, educate our residents. But lastly, we need action. Every action has a reaction. And so we need to pick up the phone. We need to contact our lawmakers. As I spoke on those companion wetlands bills, we need to push for that during the next General Assembly. And also we need to keep pressure on the federal government as well. Even though we simultaneously want our governor to act and want him to step up for the state of Illinois, we also want to make our voice known at the federal level as well.
All right, thank you so much. Kate Caldwell, a federal policy manager there for the Illinois Environmental Council. Really appreciate this conversation.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Hopefully we can all do better in the future. 1:53, let's take a quick break. Welcome back, everyone. 1:55 right now. I'm joined by our very own Tia Ewing, ahead of a very special report that you've been working on that's airing tonight. It's about prostitution.
Yes, it is.
There have been several instances where we've kind of staked out in like around Midway Airport, and I've seen those in the past. Did you kind of use that as your jumping point to then do this?
No, so in this situation, starting in the summer, in July specifically, we started getting floods of emails about prostitutes on the street. And so in the videos and the pictures, these women were naked, absolutely naked, just wearing high heels in most cases. And at first I thought, well, this can't be real, right? Like this can't be happening on Chicago streets and nobody's doing anything about it. And so then we started to dig deeper, and we realized there was a deeper problem here, and that in fact, the sheriff, he said when he first saw the videos and the pictures, he didn't believe it either. So residents really banded together. They started with us, the media. They tried to go to city officials. They were not heard. And so we started covering their stories. They held a press conference in the summer. We covered that. And then we received a message, a statement from one of the alder people who said that he was working along with Cook County Sheriff's Police to try to, erase some of this issue in the community, which again, it was happening right near Midway Airport, 47th to 50th and South Cicero Avenue. So we wanted to see, was this true? Because as you know, people put stuff in statements all the time to the media, and let's see if it's real.
Yeah.
So we contacted the Sheriff's Department, and they said, yes, we are doing sting operations. Here's the next time we're doing one, and we say, yeah, we'd like to come along. So on our journey, if you will, with the Cook County Sheriff's Police, you see them use their undercover officers as the prostitutes, that's who they pose as, and you see them reel in all of these men coming straight off of Cicero Avenue. So if you've been in that area, you know it is a very busy stretch, always busy in that area. But the problem here is not just the prostitution, the problem is that it's seeping into the neighborhood. So you see prostitutes, if you're looking out your front window at 5 o'clock in the morning, you see sex acts.
Or you're raising
right
your children in that area and what they're
and
seeing.
they're walking by seeing it.
Yeah.
So that's why we wanted to get on the case and see what is really being done about it. At this point, I guess the good news here, hearing from the community, since these sting operations have happened, we've seen a decline of prostitutes showing up there, pimps showing up there. So as of right now, the community is saying, that they're prostitution free. So our job now as the media is to stay on the case, because what residents have told us, as it warms up, that's when the block is hot again.
Sure.
And so right now it would make sense that the prostitutes would find somewhere else to go, because it's too cold to be standing on the street naked.
Yeah, and when you were with the sheriff's office or sheriff's patrol, did they talk about some other hot areas?
They did talk about a few other hot areas that they've actually been able to fix. There was a stretch along Roosevelt Road that used to be horrible back in the day. They were able to get in there and fix that. There was a stretch that we covered not too long ago on the south side in David Moore's ward. Absolutely horrible. That's been, at least to our knowledge so far, you know, staying in touch with the older people there, Alderman Moore, that has been repaired. So this has been kind of like the one area where this has existed for well over a decade.
Yeah.
They show up, they leave, they show up, they leave. So I think it's safe to say now that people know that we're watching, the police are watching, and I think that this will be a situation where they will have to continue to patrol.
Yeah.
So this isn't just a one-off where they, you know, have a sting there for a couple of weeks and that's it. They're going to continue to patrol and watch the area.
You know, one of the things I find intriguing, if you will, about stings, prostitution stings, is seeing the vast variety of people that are picked up in these stings, the walks of life that they come from to go to these spots.
We saw that, and in one case, a guy said that he needed to call his wife. I don't know what he told his wife on the other end, but in this situation, what happens is you're handcuffed. You're not taken to jail or anything like that. You're handcuffed, your car is searched. Now, if you have drugs in your car, an illegal gun in your car, yes, you are going to jail. Otherwise, your car is then towed away, it's then impounded, and then you are cited for the tow. You have to pay to get the car out because it's towed, the tow fees if you leave it there a few days, and then you're cited for solicitation. So in all, you know, just stopping to have a conversation about a sex act with a prostitute, you are probably spending about $2,000 for that situation.
And did they, or could you, whether they told you or could you see with your own eyes, like the moment it became not just a conversation, but now there is a criminal act?
Oh yeah, we could hear it over the walkie-talkie when it happened. We interviewed one John, you'll see it tonight. We're gonna air this story first at 4 on Fox 32 Chicago. That will be where you can first see it. If you gotta get home to watch your TV, you can see it at 9. But we ended up having a conversation with a John who was a livery driver in the area, who was waiting on clients. He says that he was not out there soliciting and looking for a prostitute. But you know, we've done this before, and police will tell you they hear all kinds of stories. We have too. So I mean, that was his statement, is that, you know, nothing happened. You know, I wasn't looking for a prostitute, but we were there. It's safe to say he was looking for a prostitute. So, and there were situations where someone was put in handcuffs. They had a child seat in the back, you know, so let's hope that they didn't have to pick up little Johnny that day, because they probably didn't make it. So yeah, it's crazy, you know, the lengths that people will go to do this. You know, this is on a busy street, not even a block away our homes. So they're literally meeting them on this busy street, weaving into the homes. They're in alleys, they're in backyards. This stuff is really dangerous and crazy.
And there's so many things that are then left behind. I remember in some of that video from Midway, I mean, the trash, we'll say trash, that's left behind.
Literally, and kids are out there playing. And so we did get video of families, you know, walking the streets while this is going on. So yeah, we'll have it 4 o'clock on Fox 32 Chicago, 9 o'clock on Fox 32 Chicago, or you can watch it on our website, fox32chicago.com, and of course, Fox Local.
Okay, Tia, we are definitely going to be tuning in for those. Yeah, you've had a lot of big stories this week, so thank you for taking time to tell us about this special report coming up tonight. Let's take a quick break, everyone, and we're going to get to some very intriguing images that people have been waiting on from NASA next. Just about 2:05, everyone. And for weeks, we have been waiting on the moment. It has finally arrived. The government shutdown prevented NASA from sharing imagery of the interstellar comet 3I Atlas collected by a number of the agency's missions. So now they are hosting a live event to reveal the much anticipated data. They're at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Greenbelt, Maryland. And I'll tell you now that once they are done, the one and only Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb is going to join me. It will be his first interview breaking it all down. So if you're watching us on YouTube specifically, go ahead, start dropping your questions for him. We'll try to get to as many as we can, but let's listen in for now.
We can learn about the environment from, basically where they formed, where they came from. This one came from a different environment from our own, and so we're already starting to see some really interesting differences to comets from our own solar system. 3I Atlas, as you heard, is the third known interstellar object to pass through our solar system, the first one being identified in 2017. While these types of interstellar objects have long been predicted, we are just beginning to be able to find them thanks to the newest technologies with our network of Earth-based telescopes, which are designed to find small, fast-moving objects in space. The NASA-funded Atlas Survey Telescope, which made the discovery, is part of NASA's Planetary Defense Network. Our telescopes are always watching the skies to keep us safe, and in doing so, they occasionally make major scientifically interesting discoveries, just like this one. Right away, of course, NASA's Planetary Defense Coordination Office they studied it, and they established that 3I Atlas is not a danger to Earth. In fact, it's at least twice as far away as the distance between the Earth and our Sun. On October 30th, the comet itself reached the closest it will ever be to the Sun when it crossed just inside Mars's orbit, which is why the image that Amit just showed, he noted it was the closest instrument physically to the comet because the comet was right inside the orbit of Mars. Earth was on the opposite side of the Sun, which is about as far away as our planet can possibly be from Mars. It's been clear from the moment of discovery that the comet was going to pass on the opposite side of the Sun from where the Earth is. However, it was also clear that its positioning behind the Sun was going to make observations from Earth very, very difficult. And that is why we are so happy to have our incredible fleet of NASA science spacecraft all across the solar system. And boy, were they ready for this event. NASA's science assets on board our missions have provided the United States the unique capability to observe 3I Atlas almost the entire time it passes through our celestial neighborhood. Everything NASA science does is interconnected, and nearly 20 mission teams have been working together to really rise to this challenge. 20 mission teams, by the way, and counting. Everything we're learning about the comet is possible because of the distribution of all of the different instruments on our spacecraft with different capabilities. And I'll note that for some of them, we've even pushed our scientific instruments beyond their normal capabilities, beyond the things that they were designed to achieve to allow us to capture this amazing glimpse at this interstellar traveler. In other words, we can study this comet so well because we have many different assets in different locations, observing things in different wavelengths, in different ways, with different instruments, each set of observations providing a different lens for understanding objects in the sky. So NASA's science team has kept watch on 3I Atlas for nearly its entire journey through the solar system for the first time ever. So I'll just quickly go through the timeline of which NASA spacecraft have observed the comet thus far, and we're still going. There will be more opportunities to observe this comet as it continues its journey through the solar system, passing the orbit of Jupiter in spring of 2026. So the NASA assets that are gathering observations of 3I Atlas include Hubble, the James Webb Space Telescope, TESS, SWIFT, SphereX, Perseverance Mars Rover, Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, MAVEN, Europa Clipper, Lucy, Psyche, personal favorite, Parker Solar Probe, Punch, Stereo, and ESA, NASA's SOHO mission. And I'll note that Parker Solar Probe's data were just downloaded yesterday, and indeed, we did catch several glimpses of this amazing comet. The scientific community is hard at work analyzing these images, and everyone, as always, is welcome to take a look. At NASA, we embrace open science. We make all of our data available to the public 24/7, and we invite, in fact, we really want you to tell us what you're observing and what you think about what we're looking at. We're still learning even about what questions we still need to ask, and this, of course, is the scientific process in action. All the data go to a public archive. We get those images as soon as we're able to from all of our eyes in space. As always, I am excited to see what new things we learn about our friendly solar system visitor in the days and, in fact, the years to come. So now I'm going to pass over to Sean. He's going to tell you about what our astrophysics missions have seen. They, of course, were some of the first things to look at the comet, and images from several of them have been available since the beginning of the summer. So I'm going to ask you to set the stage for us. Tell us what we've already seen before we hand over to Tom to tell us all the new stuff. Take it away, Sean.
Thanks, Nikki. Happy to. To give you some background, NASA's astrophysics missions, like all our missions, they are designed to do things that would otherwise be impossible. In this case, our nation's space telescopes stare deeper and more sharply into the universe than any other observatories in the world. And that means we're often the first to follow up and study near-Earth objects or comets like 3I Atlas after they're initially detected. That same powerful gaze that lets these telescopes see distant galaxies, those little red dots you might hear about, they also allow us to observe details about objects like 3I Atlas a little bit sooner. And the earlier we learn about these objects, the earlier we can share this information with the world, including the science community and our partners across the planet that often have ground-based assets or other space-based assets, so that they can conduct additional observations with their telescopes. In this case, our astrophysics missions came together to take advantage of this rare opportunity to study this comet that came to us from outside the solar system. From our flagship space telescopes to smaller missions like TESS and SWIFT, they all have, as Nikki said, different complementary capabilities. They don't just do things that would otherwise be impossible, they do things that even our other great telescopes can't do. So every time we add to the fleet, we add additional capabilities that expand the realm of the possible. In this case, it let us refine the orbit of this structure early on, determine what its structure is and what its composition is, what it is made of. It's a beautiful illustration of why we have not just one space telescope, but a fleet of them, because every one member of that fleet specializes in a different kind of information, contributing a different piece of the puzzle to the total understanding we have from the fleet as a whole. So for example, Old Reliable, NASA's Hubble Space Telescope, celebrated its 35th birthday earlier this year. And not too long after that, in July, it looked at 3I Atlas, not long after we discovered it from the ground. At this point, 3I Atlas was about 277 million miles from Earth. And what Hubble's images revealed was a few things. First, a teardrop-shaped coma of dust coming off that solid, icy nucleus of the comet itself. From these data, astronomers were able to more accurately narrow a few things. Importantly, the size of the nucleus. We now know it's between, at that point actually, we knew it was between 1,400 feet in diameter up to as large as 3.5 miles in diameter. And Hubble also saw that the comet was losing dust, and not just losing it, but losing it at a rate consistent with other previous sun-bound comets that originated from within our solar system, consistent with the physics that we figured out from watching those objects. Now, the last thing Hubble did is it gave us a better understanding of the orbit of this object. Tell us not just where it was, but where it was heading, so we could point other observatories at it, such as the James Webb Space Telescope. We added this to our fleet early in this decade. We didn't have it when the last two interstellar comets came around. And what James Webb did, and its companion Sphere-X, which we only launched at the beginning of this year, is it added infrared observations. The power of infrared observations is these are colors we can't see. They're redder than what our eyes can detect. And infrared light is particularly good at helping us understand the composition of objects. We can see little molecular fingerprints from the things that the objects are made of. So with these infrared observations with James Webb and Sphere-X, we detected an abundance of carbon dioxide gas in the comet's coma and in the bright cloud of gas and dust surrounding that comet as it approaches the sun. Those molecular fingerprints I mentioned, those are the little like science wiggles you might see in the top right of these images. We now know from seeing those science wiggles, those fingerprints of those molecules, that the comet has a nucleus rich in carbon dioxide as well as the presence of water ice. Now, the ratio, like we can not just say that these things are there, we can also say, what's the ratio of carbon dioxide to water? And we now know that. We know it's larger than what we usually see in solar system objects. But there's a lot of natural explanations for that. For one, the carbon dioxide is going to kind of bake off that comet earlier on when it's far away. But there's other well-understood processes that could also explain it. I'll just, to put this in context, every time we look beyond our solar system and we look at the ratios of carbon dioxide to water, we see, whether it's a star or a planet, different ratios than we see in the solar system, and that's true for this comet as well. So it could mean, and this is the last theory of why those ratios could be different, that these ices could have been exposed to higher levels of radiation than comets in our own system. Or, as I said before, it could be that the comet just formed from a region where carbon dioxide ice was particularly abundant and different from our solar system. Other missions like our SWIFT spacecraft, which studies X-rays and gamma rays, have also observed the comet. Teams even looked back through data from our TESS mission, which was designed to look at exoplanets, and found observations of the comet as early as May. That information is helping us understand the comet's history before it got closer and when those other observatories pointed at it once we knew where it was. Now that the comet is near, relatively speaking, our planetary and heliophysics missions have joined in to tell us more. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Tom Statler to talk about some of those new images.
All right, thanks very much, Sean. Before we get started, I just want to remind everybody of where we are, who is where in this play. As you saw in the animations while Nikki was speaking, the sun, of course, is at the center of our solar system. The planets are orbiting around the sun, and in this case, Comet 3I Atlas has come through on a trajectory in the opposite direction and has arrived at its closest point to the sun when the Earth was on the wrong side for us to conveniently observe. But Mars was on the correct side of the sun, and our Mars assets were able to observe the comet, and also several of our other spacecraft were on the correct side of the sun. So the scientific community is really excited about the comet and about these new observations. I'm tremendously excited to help share them with you today. This is a new scientific opportunity, and it's a new window into the makeups and histories of other solar systems. We're just beginning to learn about these types of objects and figure out what are the right questions we should ask about them. Now, let me start by going directly to what we were able to see at the beginning of September when Psyche was able to see the mission. So before that, though, in August, we organized a workshop. We organized a coordination session for the missions across the NASA fleet that had good opportunities for potentially observing 3I Atlas so that we could all share observing plans and knew what was going to be possible with our assets. I can't emphasize enough now how, thanks to the cooperation of so many mission teams, we will be accumulating a wealth of data on this comet that the science community will be digging into for years. Now, let's go back to September, and I can show you a sampling of the images collected by our different mission teams. To set the context, you're going to see a comet that's a small body with a coma around it, basically a fuzzy blob. Now remember, space is big. Nothing is ever really as close as you like, and all of these observations are very, very difficult. It's a little bit as if our NASA spacecraft were at a baseball game, watching the game from different places in the stadium. Everybody's got a camera, and they're trying to get a picture of the ball, and nobody has a perfect view, and everybody has a different camera. Now, let's return to September and see the first images from the Psyche spacecraft. NASA's Psyche mission acquired 4 broadband black and white images of the comet over the course of 8 hours on September 8th and 9th, 2025. The comet was about 33 million miles from the spacecraft at that time, and you can see in the image the large frame where the comet was seen at different times. Down in the bottom left is a blow-up, a stack in addition of all of those observations. The Psyche spacecraft is on its way to an asteroid in the main asteroid belt that's also named Psyche. And these images were the first captured from this perspective. Now, if you think in that lower left you're not seeing very much, just wait a minute, you'll see more. Now, the following week in September, the Lucy spacecraft observed the comet from the opposite direction. So let's take a look at the Lucy image. This is another broadband black and white image made by adding up a series of individual exposures that were taken on September 16th. Lucy is on its way to study asteroids that share Jupiter's orbit around the Sun, called the Trojan asteroids. Lucy was 240 million miles away from 3I Atlas, which is circled in the center, when its high-resolution LORRI camera caught the comet. You can see the comet's coma, the fuzzy halo of gas and dust surrounding 3I Atlas, and its tail, a smudge extending to the right of the comet. If you were the Lucy spacecraft looking at the comet from this angle, the sun would be a little bit over your left shoulder, and so the comet tail is pointing away from the sun, as we've seen many times before in solar system comets. For scale, this image spans about 1/3 the width of the full moon as you'd see it on the sky. Of course, at the distance of the comet, that's a much, much larger region of space than the moon. Now, this looks a little different from the Psyche image. Part of that is because the cameras are different, and part is because of the ways the Psyche and the Lucy teams decided to show their images. But also, it's because we're seeing the comet from different directions. Seeing a comet's coma in different lighting geometries, with the sun coming from different directions, is one of the key ways to learn about the physical properties of the dust that's been launched off its surface. And I want to emphasize that you do not get these views unless you have spacecraft farther from the sun than the comet is, so that you can see it backlit. We could not get this view from the vantage point of the Earth. So combining the data from Lucy, Psyche, and Earth-based telescopes, scientists are hoping to better understand both the three-dimensional structure of the comet and the nature of the dust. It's a rare opportunity to compare ancient dust from a distant solar system to that from our own. Now let's go to the next picture from the MAVEN spacecraft at Mars. At the beginning of October, 3I Atlas passed within 20 million miles of Mars, which gave our Mars spacecraft an opportunity for a close-up. And earlier you saw the image that Ahmed shared from our Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter. MAVEN is another Mars orbiter that has been studying the Martian atmosphere since 2014. Now, this picture is not a direct picture of the comet itself. It's a spectrum. You're seeing the science wiggles that Sean was just talking about. This is some of those science wiggles where the instrument, the spectrograph, the ultraviolet spectrograph on MAVEN, has looked at the comet and also split up the ultraviolet light according to color. So you're seeing three different bands in this image. On the right, you're seeing emission from hydrogen gas in the atmosphere of Mars. In the middle, there's a fainter band indicating that's coming from hydrogen gas in interplanetary space. And on the left, that blob is the signature of hydrogen gas coming from comet 3I Atlas. It's a little blob rather than a big streak because the comet is a small object in the sky relative to great big gigantic Mars and interstellar space that fills the entire field of the instrument. That definitely tells us, first of all, that the comet is there. If there were no comet, there would be no little blob on the left side of the image. But it's also telling us it's one of the many ways that we're able to discern the chemical composition of 3I Atlas. And in this particular example, it's showing us the hydrogen gas that's coming off of the nucleus. Now, MAVEN's observations, combined with the earlier observations by Swift and Webb that Sean spoke about, will help determine the water production rate, how much water vapor is released from the comet when the comet is warmed by the sun, which provides insight into the formation of the comet and its journey through our galaxy. Now, the European Space Agency and NASA's Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, or SOHO, also successfully imaged 3I Atlas from October 15th to 16th after it had passed Mars. And SOHO spotted the comet crossing its field of view from approximately 222 million miles away, or more than twice the distance of Earth from the sun. Comet 3i Atlas was expected to be too faint for SOHO to see, but this result was made using detailed image processing and overlaying, or we call it stacking, subsequent telescope images. And this image highlights the value of spacecraft and instruments designed to look directly toward the sun, as Nikki was saying before, not only to study the sun, but also to have the ability to see other objects crossing, in this case, behind the sun from the telescope's point of view. You'll be able to see the rest of the images on our 3i Atlas website, go.nasa.gov/3i-atlas. And there will be more to come. Not all of the data have been downlinked yet through NASA's Deep Space Network, and there are more observations still in work. And also, it's a long way from where we are today, seeing the initial images, to then making sure that they are accurately calibrated and processed to do science with, and then doing the analysis, combining the data sets, understanding them, and finally producing the scientific understanding, the knowledge of what this all means, which will be published in peer-reviewed scientific journals. But the answers will come later on. We are still at this phase, very much in the state where we're figuring out what are even the right questions to ask about interstellar objects. This is a snapshot of where we are very early in the scientific process. Okay, back to you, Courtney.
All right, thank you all for your opening remarks. We'll go ahead and start the question and answer portion of this event. Just a reminder to our media on the phone bridge to press *1 to enter the queue and ask your questions. We'll take our first question from the phone bridge from Marcia Dunn with the Associated Press.
Yes, hi. Based on your latest observations, what more can you tell us about the potential shape of the comet? Can you fine-tune any more on how big or small it might be, origin, all that sort of thing? Thank you.
Thanks for that question. There's a lot of territory to cover there, so let's see what I can do. The size of the nucleus still has yet to be pinned down. The best data are still from the Hubble observations that Sean was talking about. So we're still right now in that range of somewhere in the vicinity of a couple of thousand feet to a couple of miles diameter, but we'll get better on that one. The shape of the nucleus is also difficult to pin down because generally we're not resolving it in our observations. It's obscured by the dust, and especially it's obscured by the reflected sunlight off of the dust in the inner part of the coma. But what observers from the ground have been able to do is observe the brightness of the center of the comet over time to see if there's a modulation of that brightness that would be an indication of rotation. And it's very difficult to discern. So what it's looking like so far is that there's not a big, the shape of the nucleus is not very far from being round. Doesn't seem to be a big, or at least we're not seeing signatures of a very elongated object yet. There's a lot still to come there. I think you were also talking about origin. It would be great, it would be fabulous if we could trace back the incoming trajectory into the solar system and trace that back and figure out where it came from. But things are not quite so simple. Our galaxy, as Sean knows, is a big and complicated place. And the sun and all the other stars in our galaxy are in orbit around the center of the galaxy. And so 3i Atlas has been in interstellar space for a very long time. There is circumstantial evidence, given how fast it has come in to our solar system, that it came from some very old population, solar system around a very old star. Quite possibly, we can't say this for sure, but the likelihood is it came from a solar system older than our own solar system itself, which gives me goosebumps to think about, frankly, because that means the 3i Atlas is not just a window into another solar system, it's a window into the deep past, and so deep in the past that it predates even the formation of our Earth and our sun.
All right, we'll take our next question from the phone bridge from Bill Harwood with CBS. Bill, if you're talking, we can't hear you.
Tell me again. This is Bill Harwood again. Can you hear me?
We have you loud and clear.
Okay, thanks. Sorry about that. Amit mentioned the rumors that were, kind of scurrying around about this thing in the weeks leading up to this briefing today. I have two questions for anybody who would care to answer. One is, did any of you seriously, did you take seriously the proposition from some that this could be an alien spacecraft? I doubt you did, but I'm asking the question anyway. And number two, is there any evidence you see in any of the data you have that would fit an explanation like that? Or as far as you're concerned, does all of this data say conclusively that this is simply a comet that happens to be passing through the solar system? Thanks.
So I'll take that one, Bill, and thanks for the question. We love all of the different science and all of the different kind of hypotheses into what these things can be. When you start seeing something, you just got to point. It's natural to wonder what it is. And we actually love, as Amit said, we love that the world wondered along with us. And that's such a cool thing. We certainly were able, because of the measurements that Sean described from the astrophysics telescopes that immediately turned on this object once we found it. And even, I was interested. I just learned that we'd actually gone back and actually seen it before we even found it. So that was super cool. I just heard that from Sean. But, we were very quickly able to look for sort of, the easiest thing to do, I'll put it in a different way, is if you understand comets pretty well and you understand asteroids pretty well, you kind of know the signatures that you're looking for, and so you can sort of look for those quickly and tick them off and say, yep, it really does behave like a comet. The interesting thing that, Tom, I know if I throw this to him in a second, he's going to geek out about it. But the really cool thing about this is the differences, because it comes from somewhere else. And that's why we're so excited about it. It's only the third time that we've been able to identify and track something coming from outside our own solar system. We've long predicted these things occur, and now, of course, we know better how to look for them, and we now have this amazing Atlas array. We're expecting we'll find a lot more of them. But it was quick. We were quick to be able to say, yep, it definitely behaves like a comet. We certainly haven't seen any techno-signatures or anything from it that would lead us to believe it was anything other than a comet. But the super cool thing is not that it's exactly like all the comets that we see in our solar system. It's the differences that are so tantalizing for us as it gives me goosebumps too. It could be from something that existed before our own solar system. That is so cool. It's from something that predates even our own star. Yep, it's going to look different because it didn't come from our solar system, and that's what makes it so magical. You want to geek out a little bit, Tom?
You were geeking out so expertly, Nikki, to begin with. So that was fabulous. But that's exactly right. I mean, things from other places, we naturally expect them to be different from our own homegrown variety. And I like to imagine if you're fortunate enough to have grown up in Hawaii and you only drank Kona coffee, you love your Kona coffee, and then somebody says to you, well, gee, have you tried Sumatran? You're going to say, well, do you expect it to be different? And they'll say, why don't you try this? And you try it and you say, wow, that's really different. And you realize, well, I expected this to be different because it was from someplace else. It was a different environment in Sumatra. Now, does that one sip of coffee tell you everything about the weather in Sumatra and the soil and the people who harvest the coffee? Bless them. Of course not, but it's different, and yet it's still coffee. And that's what we have in this case. We have a cometary body. It behaves, it resembles the homegrown comets that we have in our solar system, and yet it's excitingly different in particular ways. It does the same thing comets do. It evaporates carbon dioxide gas. It evaporates water. But it's evaporating more carbon dioxide compared to water. So that's a very interesting thing. Comets evaporate dust, and the dust is broken down. The minerals are broken down by the ultraviolet light of the sun. And comets, we know comets put out nickel, they put out iron. That's what comets do. This particular one is putting out more nickel than iron. That's really interesting, really remarkable, and something to be studied in the future. So we're always interested in new ideas. We're always interested in new suggestions, and all ideas are good when they're born. But those that stand the test of time, those that stand up to testing, those that are supported by the evidence, are the ones that survive.
All right, we'll take our next question on the phone bridge. And that one comes from Matthew Glasser with ABC.
Good afternoon. Thank you for doing this. Tom mentioned that the answers will come in time. I'm curious about what are some of the hopes that we might discover from this comet. What might it tell us about our planet, about our solar system, about the universe? Are there key things you're looking for as you start to analyze this data, and are you excited about anything in particular when it comes to better understanding how things are working out there?
Sure, I can take that. Every new object we discover is a new piece in the puzzle. What we're trying to do always is to understand the universe. That's part of the NASA mission, is to understand the solar system, understand the universe, understand the origin of planets, the origin of life. And that is a huge question, and we get little bits, little clues to parts of that puzzle, and we start trying to put that puzzle together. We have gained tremendous amount of information from hundreds of years of astronomical observation and from decades of in situ spacecraft observation has revealed our planets as actual places, not just points in the sky that you could barely see with your own eyes. We've learned about comets and asteroids, and we're beginning to put together a picture of how all of those planet-forming minerals and planet-forming ices came together to form our planets, and how our solar system changed over time. Just one example, we get a fascinating clue from the objects like Pluto that we've been discovering since the 1990s, the trans-Neptunian objects. The way they are distributed through space in the outer solar system show us clues to how the orbits of the major planets may have changed over time in the early solar system. A fascinating thing, and questions that we would never have thought to ask before we knew about these trans-Neptunian objects. Now, interstellar objects, like I said before, are new windows, and it's windows that we've never even looked out of before. So what we're going to find is way too early to predict, but I think we're getting a hint of the breadth, the wide spectrum of conditions that existed in different parts of the galaxy, in different solar systems, where the compositions, the elemental abundances, the mineral abundances may have been very, very different. It would be a different picture if we were seeing the first 3 interstellar objects and we'd say, gee, those look exactly like our homegrown comets. That would have been really interesting, and we would have said, well, maybe our galaxy is a boring place because every place is the same. What we're seeing with this is not every place is the same. That's a good thing. Lots of places to explore, and they will be different if we ever manage to get there.
Yeah, I think of these as frozen fossils from their moments of formation, including the things in and now from beyond our solar system. Or in some cases, we point our telescopes at other debris disks, which is just a whole system full of these small bodies. And so now what this will let us do is tell that story in a broader context between the detailed and large library of data we have on those origins of our own solar system, and how volatiles were delivered to make life possible here on Earth.
All right, we have been listening in there to an amazing announcement from NASA as they are finally sharing the information from Atlas, the 3i Atlas. They said they are expanding the realm of the possible, and we're going to expand our conversation with Harvard professor Avi Loeb right after this break. Welcome back, 240, and let's go ahead and bring in Harvard professor Avi Loeb. We have waited to be able to talk to you about this 3i Atlas, and finally we get some images from NASA. So they say they are opening a window into other solar systems. What was your reaction to what we just saw and heard?
Well, there wasn't much news, I must say. An hour before that press conference, I was asked by a reporter, what do I expect? And I said that I don't expect big news. NASA will repeat the official mantra that 3i Atlas is a natural comet and that they were unable to process the data until now because of the government shutdown. And probably the high-rise image will show a fuzzy ball of light like the Hubble image. But I hoped to be surprised, and I was not.
Oh, man.
But we did see new data. But nothing major in terms of the insights as to the nature of the object. There was data presented in addition to the one we already saw from the Hubble Space Telescope, the James Webb Space Telescope, SPHERE-X, SWIFT tests. I mean, these are things we already witnessed. There was some new data from the Lucy spacecraft, MAVEN, SOHO, HiRISE. But again, all these images were fuzzy. There was no new insight offered by them. And of course, one would like to analyze those images. I mean, they detected, for example, hydrogen from the spectrograph on MAVEN. So that, of course, says something about the production rate of water, because hydrogen comes from the breakup of water molecules. And one can also infer that from the detection of hydroxyl radicals, oxygen and hydrogen molecules that were detected actually a few weeks ago by a radio telescope, Meerkat. And it was detected again today. There was a report from early November. So, I mean, these are details that can be combined to infer production rate of water. We already know that carbon dioxide, based on Webb telescope data, was much more abundant than water. And so the main questions we have about 3i Atlas were not really addressed. And I would say that the data that was released over the past week or two after 3i Atlas came out of the direction of the sun, so we can observe it from Earth, that data is far more interesting. It shows jets, multiple jets going in different directions, and we're yet to see a big telescope imaging those jets. So far, we saw amateur astronomers' telescopes. And so these images are intriguing. The question of whether 3i Atlas, for example, shows non-gravitational acceleration, you know, that's still being calculated, debated. That's another important insight about what happened to it when it came closest to the sun. And of course, as it gets closest to Earth, that will be on December 19th, we'll have the best opportunity to use the hundreds of telescopes on Earth and the Hubble and Webb space telescopes to get our best data on it. So as far as I can tell, in terms of scientific output, there wasn't much offered in this press conference.
Plenty of questions for you. One question that was just posed. Can you respond to their conversation about, or their comments about it putting off nickel?
Well, so indeed, that's one of the anomalies. I listed 12 anomalies about 3i Atlas. One of them is that the detection of nickel was not supplemented by significant detection of iron. And in fact, the first detection of nickel had no iron, just an upper limit. Very extreme ratio of nickel to iron that was never seen before in any comet. And obviously that's puzzling, because nickel and iron are produced in exploding stars in similar amounts. And in fact, for the solar composition, there is more iron than nickel. So we've never seen something like that. And, you know, when we, for example, find nickel from the impact of asteroids that are nickel rich, they're also iron rich. There is never a situation where it's mostly nickel and very little iron, except for industrial production of alloys, nickel alloys that are used for aerospace applications. So, I mean, they are always seeing whatever data we get as a signature of an unusual comet. Okay, so no matter how unusual the chemical composition would be, they would say, well, it came from a different environment. What do you expect? The main anomaly that I find extremely puzzling, and they didn't even mention it, is the size of the object. So based on the data that we have by now, which is not just the Webb telescope data that they mentioned, but other details, it looks like the object is at least 5 kilometers in diameter and maybe more. And that means that it's at least 1,000 times more massive than the previous comet. We know it was a comet, Borisov, discovered in 2019. And moreover, it's about 1 million times more massive than Oumuamua, the first interstellar object. So when you see the third object being 1,000 times more massive than the second and 1 million times more massive than the first, it should raise a big question. How is that possible? Because we should have found 1,000 Borisovs and 1 million Oumuamuas before finding one giant iceberg of the type that we found. So this should be really a puzzle, and they should have mentioned it as a puzzle, but they don't even mention that. And the second is, why do we have it in the plane of the planets? I mean, obviously, it's a great fortune that all the NASA observatories can look at it, and they mentioned the fact that they look at it. They're really happy about the fact that they could monitor it all the time. But that fact that they can monitor it all the time is really a miracle, because only 1 in 500 incoming objects would be aligned so well with the ecliptic plane of the planets that allows all these NASA assets to be used. So they don't comment about that. So all the things that appear extremely rare, like all these features, maybe they say something that is not well understood. So NASA, these administrators basically are trying to portray an image of an unusual comet because it came from a different environment, but they don't attend to the fact that there are extremely rare properties of this comet that should puzzle them. So I think the appropriate response to that would be, there are very puzzling facts about this. Maybe indeed it's a natural comet, but it means that we don't understand the factories that make such things. Because if we get such a big package that happens to be aligned with the plane of the planets and shows much more nickel than iron, maybe there is something really fundamentally wrong with the way we think about the origin of this thing. They don't even bring this up. I mean, I don't have an issue with them claiming it must be natural, but even if it's natural, it seems to me that the main message is that we are missing something. We don't know how such an object is generated or created.
If it's not, again, we've got a ton of questions for you on YouTube, and I know your time is tight today. Adam says, if they're billions of years old, like you said, wouldn't they have discovered a more efficient form of transportation rather than using a comet-like spacecraft? Wouldn't they have discovered faster than light travel, teleportation, wormhole dimensional travel, etc., after billions of years? That's why I'm skeptical on this whole object being of alien origin.
Well, this is a strange question, because whoever asked this question is skeptical because of ideas that have nothing to do with what we know about physics. We don't know if it's possible to travel faster than light. In fact, Einstein's theory of relativity says it's not. So the person who asks the question says, why couldn't they discover faster than light travel? Well, because as far as we know, it doesn't exist, okay? And the second is wormholes. As far as we know, it doesn't exist. We don't know how to make a wormhole. We don't know if it's possible to make a wormhole, because then you would build a time machine that would violate the laws of physics. So as far as we know, such things do not exist. So you can't ask a question saying they would have discovered it, because we don't know that such things exist. Okay. Now you can ask, why wasn't it moving faster than 10 to the minus 4 of the speed of light? In principle, that's a good question. But if they were to move faster, we would never discover an object moving close to the speed of light, because the telescopes would not record an object. They would basically get a smearing of the light from the object along a line, and it would be very dim, and the observers would dismiss it as an object. So an object moving too fast, much faster than the typical speed of asteroids, comets in our solar system, would be discarded. We will not hear about it. The observers will never report about it. So when you ask why don't we see things moving faster, it's because of a selection effect. Our observations are not tuned to detect such objects.
Okay, so according to Rizzle, he says, according to the trajectory it entered our solar system, where did 3I Atlas come from?
We don't know where it came from, because that depends on the duration of the journey. And we have no clock on it to tell us how long the journey was. The only thing we have is that it moves at a high speed when it entered the solar system relative to the local population of stars. So the claim is, well, maybe it came from an old star, because old stars are kicked around and they reach higher speeds. But the problem with that proposition, and I wrote a paper related to that, is that there is a caveat, because you could imagine a parent star that is moving slowly, and then the ejection speed from that parent star was large. So we don't know if the ejection speed was large or the original host star was moving fast, and therefore we can't tell the age. There is no way for us to tell the age of the object unless we assume that the object acquired or inherited the original speed of its parent star, which is an assumption. We don't know if it's true or not, because we don't know what the ejection mechanism was and where did this object come from within the vicinity of that star.
Isaac asked, why do we have virtually no high-resolution images of the details in the surface of the moon and Mars? Don't we have the right people to clear that data?
Oh, we do have images of the surface of the moon and Mars, but when you say not enough resolution, that is dictated by the aperture of the cameras that were used. So there is the Mars orbiter that is actually gave us detailed images of Mars. There was a lunar orbiter that gave us detailed images of the moon, but we can do much better. And in the future, hopefully, there would be missions that would map those surfaces to much greater details. And moreover, as we go to these places, we could map it from up close.
Robert says, why do the jets and plumes that appear to be coming from 3I Atlas seem to not be influenced by a 16-hour rotation?
That's an excellent question. I asked the same. That's one of my anomalies. You would expect, given the typical speed of the material in those jets, you would expect to see wiggles that we don't see. And somehow the jets are tightly collimated. So this is an important puzzle that needs to be addressed. Again, we gain new knowledge in science out of asking questions or paying attention to anomalies. We don't learn much by saying, oh, it's a comet, comets do strange things, and therefore we shouldn't worry about it. That's not the way we learn something new.
Lots of people bringing up how long it took them to release this data. This one says, why would NASA have a big event to release a picture of a simple rock? And with almost 50 days without releasing anything, why should we believe them? They are known to alter their images all the time. Bring SMART back. That's what they said.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that they modify the images, but NASA is a big bureaucratic organization, and bureaucracy rules. So if there is a government shutdown, they may have given instructions not to release any data related to 3I Atlas because they want it to be processed through the headquarters. They didn't do the same about other data. For example, the HiRISE camera was taking images of Mars and releasing them, a day later. You can look at the HiRise website and you will see images that were released during the shutdown. No problem at all. However, the image of 3i Atlas was waiting for 45 days before we got to see it, and it wasn't particularly revealing anything, insightful about the nature of the object. So I do think that it's just the NASA bureaucracy that set some rule about 3i Atlas. They wanted to have the data publicly available after, the administrators have a chance to review it. And I don't see anything beyond that. It's just the bureaucracy taking hostage the dissemination of scientific information. Of course, if it was an academic institution where there is no threat from shutdown, and even if there was a university that was shut down, the scientists would still process it at their home and release the data immediately to the public. So it's a very different mentality. But in a government organization, the employees are not allowed to do anything to overrule what the administration tells them, even if they can easily process the data.
I'm going to try to get to 2 or 3 more questions. This one says, Avi, do you think the 1977 signal could have been from 3i Atlas, as it is reported to have come from the same general direction?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Again, related to one of the anomalies in my list of 12. You can check my latest essay on medium.com where I discuss all 12. So I actually encouraged the radio observers to look at 3i Atlas to check if there is any radio transmission. And today there was a report from Meerkat, the radio observatory there. And again, it's discussed in my essay today. And they put an upper limit at a particular range of frequencies, radio frequencies. They observed it on November 5th. And so the limit is just applicable to that particular date and over some range of frequencies. And during that time, they were able to set an upper limit on the power transmitted as being less than that of a cell phone. So you can say that there was no cell phone on November 5th transmitting anything from 3i Atlas.
Okay. Dr. Loeb, if 3i Atlas were to change course, or if it sent out smaller spacecraft or fragments of itself, how long would it take to arrive to Earth? Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. So if it changed course and at roughly the same speed, not making it much faster, then it would take a couple of months or so, a few months, depending on exactly the details. And in fact, that was worked out in a paper that I co-authored in the middle of July, that was published by now in a peer-reviewed journal, along with Adam Hibberd and Adam Kroll. We considered the possibility that 3i Atlas is a technological spacecraft and asked what kind of a velocity shift does it need to have in order to reach Earth at a particular date. And you can look at our plots and you will see for any target date, there is a different velocity shift that it needs to acquire at an earlier time. And so we give all kinds of scenarios for that.
How will we know that the images are authentic and not doctored?
We will never know that because we don't have access to the instruments and the flow of data, but we have to trust the NASA scientists. And science is based on trust. As you can tell these days, if you go online, you would see a lot of fake data, misinformation. You can't trust people, but there is a code of honor in science that data should never be fabricated by scientists. And there are rare examples where such fake data was produced and the scientists were punished severely for that. So I would be really surprised if that happened here. I trust scientists unless proven differently. And so I would just assume this is the data they have, especially because it's not very impressive. Now, you might say, oh, well, maybe the original data was much more impressive. I would find it really hard to imagine that they would make the images fuzzier than they actually are.
Okay, so what happens now? Is your team going to stay up all night and analyze what we just saw?
Yeah, I have some collaborators that would look into the data. I hope we will have access to that data and analyze it, see what kind of information we can get from it. But as I said at the beginning, I don't expect big news from that because the quality of the data doesn't look impressive to me. It will just be marginal to what we already know. And really, it's really the coming weeks, I think, where we will get new insights to 3i Atlas.
Avi, we always appreciate you. Thank you so much for staying on with us and taking so many of our viewers' questions from YouTube and for analyzing all that we just heard, whether it was impressive or not.
Thanks for having me. I will always tell you what I think, and with me, what you see is what you get.
All right, let's leave it there, man. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right, it's 3:01. We'll be right back. It's 3:03 right now, seeing some mixed results there as we look at the big board for the day. We have been in the green, in the red, and back again. But we are in the green for right now, up just 47 points. But hey, it's something. I saw that the S&P 500 rose today after a 4-day slide that was centered around technology. So there's much to talk about here as we look at what's happening with stocks. They have been tumbling this time each day when we've been going back to the big board. We have seen them tumbling. Red, red, red. Finally, some mixture there. Crypto specifically, though, 6 weeks after hitting a record high, has plummeted. Altcoin Daily's Austin Arnold is here to get us up to date on what's going on and what, if anything, people should be doing during this time. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. Love Chicago. And if I could just start out, Altcoin Daily speaks to an audience of 3.5 million across all social platforms, on X, on YouTube, and we get this question all the time. Why is Bitcoin dipping? And to me, this is sort of a generational buy the dip opportunity because Bitcoin is dipping due to many, many macro factors that have nothing to do with the underlying fundamental technology. In fact, I would argue Bitcoin, compared to 5 years ago, is 5-10x fundamentally better, the fundamentals, yet Bitcoin's dipping due to a variety of macro factors like AI bubble scares, that's dipping all markets, as well as a liquidity crunch brought by the government shutdown.
Very interesting. So there is a lot behind the numbers.
There is. And if anything, I would encourage, the Altcoin Daily audience knows crypto investors understand we want that volatility. They're in it for the long term. I would call this a generational buying opportunity if you're a long-term investor, because year to date, 11 months, Bitcoin has sort of kept pace. But if we go back 13 months, 14 months, Bitcoin has been one of the best performing assets in the global economy. If we go back 2 years, if we go back 5 years, Bitcoin is always one of the best performing assets long term. That's due to its finite supply and continued adoption. And if anything, I would call this Bitcoin and crypto's 1996 moment.
Oh, interesting.
Meaning for the internet. It is very interesting. The internet, for the first time ever, really hit its stride and really got regulated in 1996 due to something called the Telecommunications Act that opened up the path for fair and known regulation to happen for the internet. The biggest piece of cryptocurrency regulation is happening in the next few months. It's called the Market Structure Bill, Clarity Act, and that's going to regulate the cryptocurrency industry for the very first time. And for perspective, cryptocurrency has grown for the last 15 years, been one of the best performers when it was a scourge on traditional finance. Now, for the first time ever, just like 1996, the largest financial economy in the world, the United States, is regulating it, and thus long-term fundamentals only improving.
When people talk about a bear market and how crypto fits into that right now, can you explain that?
Absolutely. Bear market means price goes down for an extended period of time. Bull market means price goes up for an extended period of time. The cool thing about investing in cryptocurrency is that, again, a 5% to 20% dip in traditional markets, people lose their mind. In cryptocurrency, that's common. People invest for the volatility. Right now, the Bitcoin price is ranging between 100K and I'd say 70K, which is right around where the price was when we had our last elections last year. Range bound until then, and whether it's a bull or bear market, long-term investors have always done well.
When I was reading up, getting ready to speak to you, I kept seeing some comments about a flash crash on October 10th. What was that?
100%. I'm glad you brought that up. That was sort of the catalyst for why the cryptocurrency market led the drawdown that we're seeing in all the broader markets. In cryptocurrency and in all markets, there's leverage trading, people trading on margin. Traders exist in all markets. We had something called a leverage flush out, which were all those traders, the majority of them that were long on the market got flushed out and they were forced to liquidate. As a long-term investor, that makes me feel good knowing that the Bitcoin price initially didn't go down because anything fundamentally changed. It's just that there was forced liquidations, meaning there's forced sellers in a very short amount of time. That happened on October 10th. And then, of course, the market has been chop-solidating, working the confidence back in and working its way out since then.
So would a turnaround be beneficial if you're looking for volatility?
Investors love a turnaround. Like I said, that's, in a long-term perspective, people understand that it's going to go up and down in the short term. I think anything above $70,000 is very normal with Bitcoin, considering we were just there about 11 months ago, 12 months ago. Right now, the 50-week moving average, if we're going to get technical, my worst case scenario, right now that's in bear markets, Bitcoin usually always returns to the 200-week moving average. And since we just crossed under the 50-week moving average, the 200-week moving average is around a $55,000 to $60,000 Bitcoin. Worst case scenario, we could always dip more towards then. That's if the broader global markets, traditional stock market, NASDAQ, if we're all about to enter a global bear market, that's my worst case scenario.
What would we or you be looking for to signal a turnaround?
A turnaround, I think there's three big catalysts to me that tell me long-term cryptocurrency is not going away. In fact, cryptocurrency is getting bigger. Number one, like I said, huge piece of legislation, the biggest crypto legislation that we've ever seen, Market Structure Bill, that's expected to get passed by earliest December or early next year is the expectation. That's catalyst number one. Catalyst number two is something we actually have already seen. It's called the Genius Act. That's already happened a few months ago, still very new, that regulated stablecoins. For the folks at home, a stablecoin is just a digital dollar pegged one-to-one. And what we saw weeks after stablecoins finally got regulated, we saw JP Morgan, Citibank, MasterCard, Visa all say we're going to roll out stablecoin pilots for customer transactions. Why they like it? Because it's cheaper, faster, more instant settlement. And all that's being built on other cryptocurrencies besides Bitcoin, like Ethereum and Solana primarily. So again, we are in very early innings of this. That was catalyst number 2. And then for the turnaround, I think we're going to continue to see governments and central banks globally adopting and accumulating this technology. For example, Luxembourg, the central bank, the government just allocated 1% of their sovereign wealth fund into Bitcoin. Their exact quote is, "We will hold for the long term."
Wow.
That's 1%. The Czech central bank just announced a Bitcoin allocation. They're buying Bitcoin. And of course, the United States government has announced a Bitcoin strategic reserve. So all those factors, I think, is going to be the upbid for Bitcoin specifically in the long term.
Is there anything else that's up and coming that would have a significant impact on Bitcoin or cryptocurrency?
I think the number one thing people should focus on is Bitcoin, just because it is digital gold. And in a world where inflation's never going to end, they're never going to stop printing money, the debt is uncontrollable. How do we get out of that? They're going to be forced to print. You want a digital store of value like Bitcoin. If we're looking at other things, I think the stablecoin narrative is something that's being adopted by central banks and financial behemoths globally, and that's being built on Ethereum and Solana.
If someone is totally, I don't know what these kids are talking about. I'm not even trying to. How do you get them on board? What do you say to someone who is fundamentally against cryptocurrency and Bitcoin? How do you get them to be a believer?
I think I would focus on the people that are interested, because I think it's, number one, sort of a generational thing. The older generation loves gold. The younger generation, only growing up in the digital age, wants a digital store of value. They like digital currency. I would say right now, companies like Coinbase, other big blue chip crypto companies in the S&P 500, meaning a lot of those people that don't even necessarily know crypto, they're forced to invest in crypto companies if they're in indexes like the S&P 500. I think the biggest thing is, what is the solution for the global fiscal irresponsibility of central banks and governments everywhere? You need a store of value. I think we're going to start to see hard assets take up more, absorb more of that inflation. And I think you got to ask yourself, do you think the world is getting more digital in the next 10 plus years or less digital? I personally think the world is getting more digital, and that means a digital store of value is not going away. In fact, it's only getting more relevant.
All right, and what are some best practices? I'll leave us on a note of what are the best practices if you are looking to jump in?
Oh man, this is something, great question. We talk about this on Altcoin Daily, which again, you can find on X, on YouTube, global audience, although we love Chicago and the Midwest. I'm from the Midwest. I would say 2 things. Never invest more than you're willing to lose. This is an incredibly volatile market, which means you're going to have to be a long-term investor and weather that volatility. So understand what you're getting into. And number 2, and this is something that I still have to remind myself regularly, is take emotion out of investing. If you've done the homework and you have an investor's thesis on where you think it'll be, years from now, then you like dips like this. They're buying opportunities, and understand where the market, the story, the narrative is going, 1 to 4 years from now, 10 years from now. That's what I look at.
Wow. All right. A lot to wrap our brains around right now. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Austin.
Appreciate you.
Okay. Take care. It's just about 3:15, everyone. Let's take a quick break. All right, 3:16 right now, and we just have a couple more conversations before we get out of here for the 4 o'clock news. We're going to talk about shopping during this season, and then we're going to talk about holding some of your cash back so that you can be a giver to those in need. But because Black Friday is coming up, personal finance company WalletHub today released a report on the best places to shop on Black Friday in 2025. I'm going to go ahead and bring in writer and analyst Chip Lupo. Chip, I was shocked to see JCPenney at the top of your list.
Yeah, it's interesting because JCPenney is one of those, maybe a generation ago between JCPenney, Sears, catalog, wish list, those types of things. But if you look at the overall picture, it does seem that you can get some pretty good deals from all of your major box store, big box retailers, and JCPenney is right there at the top of the list.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, like, I remember when I was a kid going to JCPenney to get my hair done and looking, yes, at the catalog. But the last time I knew, JCPenney was struggling to stay open. So you have Belk and Kohl's round out the top three.
Right. Again, three big box retailers, or what we used to call department stores, if you remember that. Now, all are offering significant discounts, and part of the reason is to entice shoppers, to get people to come into their stores, because we're seeing a trend where more and more people are opting to shop from home. And a lot of these big box or department store, these retailers aren't quite ready to compete with the Amazons as far as their online platform. Now, some like Best Buy, like Walmart, and some of your major warehouse clubs are making great strides, but most of your traditional department stores are choosing, for whatever reason, maybe not raise their online profile and would rather have shoppers come into their stores.
I mean, there's something nostalgic about going into the store physically too, even if you shop online primarily these days. But
particularly part of a mall, JCPenney's were always attached to, were always the anchor store for the traditional malls.
Yeah. And of course, we see fewer and fewer traditional malls. So you have Amazon at number 7 on the list. Now, are you doing this list by the rate of discount? And is that why are we not seeing as much of a discount from maybe some of the online retailers versus the big box stores that actually are trying to get people to come in?
Right. Yeah, you'll find that your online retailers, the discounts are somewhat less, because what they count on is that you'll go in to a particular website and you'll come out with more than what you bargained for, more or less. Because you say you go into Amazon, and once you're on the website, it's like one-stop shopping, and it's really, really hard, unless you're really a really disciplined shopper, to avoid the impulse buy. So they kind of count on that, and they'll always, like, for whatever reason, if you're interested, if you're purchasing a particular item, then they'll come up with a pop-up window and say, well, you might be interested in this. Okay, so you click that, and the next thing your cart is like overflowing with goods.
I'm not going to say that has ever happened to me, like maybe already this week. But anyway.
Not confirmed nor denied.
Not confirmed nor denied, yeah. So are we seeing that Black Friday then is coming back as an event? It felt like, 80s, 90s, Black Friday was like, oh my goodness. I mean, even coming into reporting, I remember always having that assignment of going out. You would see people, like, right after they ate Thanksgiving dinner, start staking out at stores overnight.
Camping out?
Yeah. Or maybe one family member going and sitting, and then they kind of alternate who goes. Are we seeing Black Friday make a comeback?
I think we are, because if nothing else, there's still somewhat of a social component to it. It's like it's the place to be, and it's become somewhat of a tradition. You eat, and let's say, the man would watch football, the women would go camp out in front of the department store. So it's kind of a tradition in that way. But again, there still are some discounts. But what you're seeing also is that they're moving the goalpost a little bit, because Black Friday is suddenly becoming Black November and Black Fall.
Yeah, true.
These sales into October, which is good because it does give you more time to plan out and shop and find really good deals.
Yeah, but then it makes you question the deal also, because you're like, wait, if I buy it now, is it going to be less next week? You say the overall average discount for Black Friday is 37%.
37%, and that's all of them combined. And again, now, when we were talking about the traditional department stores, your biggest discounts are going to be in things like jewelry, apparel, those types of things. But you can go to other retailers for bigger discounts on electronics or even appliances. Black Friday is it's a great day. That's not usually something that's traditionally on someone's wish list unless they're in desperate need of one, like a washer, dryer, or say a refrigerator. But you can get some really good deals for appliances on Black Friday also.
Yeah, except then you're like buying for yourself listen, I'm, again, this entire conversation, I'm not passing judgment on anyone, but then you're just buying for yourself when like Black Friday was, traditionally supposed to be about getting your Christmas shopping for everyone else done.
Oh, exactly. Now, sometimes it could be a household gift, a new refrigerator if you need one, or a washer dryer. Those aren't necessarily bad ideas, but yeah, most people are thinking traditional gifts like electronics. Those are always popular, apparel, things like that. And I have to tell you though, me personally, I would not walk into a Best Buy on Black Friday if I lived in a loft right above the store.
Yeah. And I think one of the other issues that people had over the years is the 37% worth, and there may only be, whatever their inventory may be is not looking like what the line to get it is. So is it worth the 37% that you may get a discount on for it?
Now it depends on the item. For if you're one of these people that has to have a new iPhone or the newest laptop, then it's worth the discount. But I think also what you're not seeing as much of, because they're spreading this thing out, you're not seeing as many incidents where people are macing each other or stampeding each other, getting in fist fights, busting into the store like it was at a rock concert.
Yeah, definitely saw those things over the years, and obviously hope every year that it's always peaceful. But what were some of your other big takeaways from putting this list together?
Yeah, again, interesting. It just blows me away that your traditional department stores get you the biggest deals. Now, again, we're talking about things like, and it runs the gamut, but I think the biggest takeaway is that because they're stretching the dates out like as early as October, take advantage of those, because not only might you get a better deal, but you also have to think about availability. If you're one of these people that's going to wait until like Black Friday or beyond, in a lot of cases, some of these highly sought after items might not even be in stock by Christmas time.
Yeah, that is another good aspect of it. What if it goes before you get there? I always say that's like a sign from the Lord up above that I didn't need it. If it's already gone, I wasn't supposed to have it. So let's go over a few more that you have on the list. Macy's was at number 4, everybody. Home Depot came in at number 5. BJ's came in at number 6. I mentioned Amazon at number 7. Target at number 8. 9, Newegg. I don't know what Newegg is. I'm unfamiliar with Newegg.
Newegg is an electronics, primarily a electronics website, a sales website. That's where computers, accessories, primarily electronics.
Okay. And then that would lead us right into number 10, which is Best Buy. What changes are we seeing this year versus last year's list?
Well, I think you're starting to see, what you're going to see is more of a surge in electronics because of the tariffs that are still looming, and they're going to be hitting iPhones and electronics pretty hard because most of those do come from overseas. So I think you're going to see a run on those in particular, because what happens is that if there are tariffs in place, it doesn't affect current inventory. It only affects items that are imported once the tariffs are enacted. So this uncertainty is going to probably lead to a rush on some of these items that are subjected to some of these tariffs.
Any other advice that you would give based off of what you've seen?
Well, two things. Always walk in with a budget. It's the don't grocery shop if you're hungry mentality. Okay, always go in with a budget, a clear budget, and write out the maximum price that you're willing to spend. And if the sale price is above that, it's probably not going to be worth it. Secondly, avoid impulse buying, because it's very easy to walk in with a single train of thought, with a well thought out plan, but all it takes is like one impulse buy. Oh, I have to have this, or I think this person would love this. And you find out that maybe it wasn't such a good deal after all, and then you're stuck basically with something that you didn't want or need in the first place.
Chip, you're going to be the little angel on my shoulder when I get to online shopping that's going to say, don't impulse buy, Anita. Don't impulse buy.
And that's the work. Impulse buying is particularly bad on online shopping. So you have to be really disciplined, because online is like one-stop shopping. And it's all right there in front of you. It's a click away, and next thing you know, your cart runneth over. In stores, you can be a little bit more disciplined, because maybe you don't feel like walking all the aisles. The crowds are too much. You just want to get in and get out. But online shopping takes a tremendous amount of discipline to avoid those impulse buys.
Be disciplined, everyone. Be disciplined. Chip, thank you so much for your time and sharing a bit of your expertise. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Have a happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. It's 3:28, everyone. We'll be right back. $3:31 right now. Thanks for staying with us, everyone. In these last 30 minutes, we're bringing in a gem to our station and to the city of Chicago. Longtime Fox 32 News anchor Corey McPherson is the co-chair for Salvation Army Chicago Advisory Board. Great to see you.
Anita, it's great to be with you. It's a long time.
It's been a long time, and I see you're not fully retired. You're still working.
Well, yeah. I mean, you can't stay on the lazy boy and watch Fox 32 News every day, all day long. You got to do other things. So, the Salvation Army is something I've been a part of for 25 to 30 years, and in the last 3 or 4 years, to a greater degree, on the board and involved, and I've really enjoyed it. The degree to which the Salvation Army touches our community is really, it's amazing, the depth and width of their impact, and it's been a blast to be a part of it.
Absolutely, and one of their biggest campaigns is the Red Kettle campaign. It's back. Tell us a little bit about what we need to know for this season.
Yeah, well, there's a lot. First of all, the campaign is underway officially, and our goal is to raise $12 million.
Oof.
And to do that, we need your help, especially you, Anita. I know you're a
I got the whole 12 million.
All those gold coins. But it's, the Red Kettle campaign goes way, way back. They first started this program, believe it or not, in 1891 in San Francisco. And then about 10 years later, it came to Chicago, and it's been a part of the fabric of the holiday season for more than a century now, obviously. And there will be 850 some kettles spread all over Chicagoland and down into central Illinois. And we hope that you can participate and get involved. And one thing I know, and I've been out there ringing the bell on State Street over Millennium Park the last couple of years. I've done it for many years. It's a blast. But one part of it that in recent years I've noticed is, and everybody knows this, people aren't carrying cash like they used to, right? Everybody's got a card or their phone or whatever, but we've solved that now. And so there's really no, like, for example, when I'm out there, Anita, doing my thing and ringing that bell and have the kettle, come on, give us a little something if you can. And they say, oh, I'd love to, but I just don't have a thing on me. I say, you know what? Do you have your wallet? Do you have your phone? They say, I got my phone. Okay, come on over. And if you have, you can use your PayPal, your Apple Pay, your Google Pay. You can Venmo. There's a QR code. So we can work with anything.
Corey, it's amazing to think of just, the change that might drop in there adding up to millions, and then the impact that has. Talk a little bit about how far that money goes.
Yeah, it does go quite a way. As I mentioned, the massive impact of the Salvation Army and the lives that we're able to touch. Last year alone, during the entire year, we served more than 250,000 meals to folks that otherwise maybe wouldn't have had a meal at all that particular day. We put folks up housing-wise, 50,000 different nights over the course of the year. And the thing of it is, too, you talk about, okay, so what else, besides housing and besides food, what else does the Salvation Army do? And the list is really long. There's a general sort of poverty prevention program that is ongoing and quite involved. But beyond that, there are substance abuse programs, temporary and more long-range housing options exist. There are substance abuse programs, which I mentioned, veterans programs, after-school programs, of course, food pantries, things of that nature. And also, there's a camp. You might not know it, but in southern Wisconsin, Camp Wonderland, one of my favorite elements of what the Salvation Army does, where we bring young folks, usually from the inner city, who maybe don't otherwise have an opportunity to get out in the country, and it really can be a game changer for a lot of these young folks. So that's just really scratching the surface of what the Salvation Army does and what your money will go towards. And that's the other thing that's important, I think, Anita, in terms of the money that we bring in via the Red Kettle campaign. Every dollar stays right here in our region. A lot of times the money goes to the national and then it's distributed here and there. Anyway, this stays right here in this case. So you're helping your neighbors, your friends, your folks down the block. And I think that's important to consider.
It seems meaningful for so many different reasons. But what has it meant to you to be a part of it and to increase your visibility in it as the years have gone by?
Boy, that's a good question. It just is very fulfilling. It's rewarding. And I think what it does for me, and I'm around the staffers and the officers and other board people, and to see the passion and the authentic desire to help others. The motto is, doing the most good. And the more I'm a part of it, the more I understand how 100% on the money that phrase is. It just captures what the Army does. And it's been tremendous. And I think when you really get to a time we're in now, it hits home maybe even more, where you see so many people in need. I am told by our staffers in Anita that right now the lines for the food pantry and the meal programs are about double what they were even 2 or 3 years ago. And that tells you really all you need to know. The homelessness levels are up almost 3 times what they used to be in just a few short years ago here in Chicago. And one of the things that we have found more and more in recent weeks is that folks get in line to get some food, or maybe they need a warm coat. Maybe they need supplies for the family, and they just have no other place to go, and they come to us, which we're so happy that we can provide that for them. And what they've told us is, a few years ago, I was donating to the Salvation Army, and now I'm in line to get help.
Wow.
And it all kind of comes home, right? I mean, the idea that can happen to anybody at any time. Right. So it's good to give back, and we're trying to do the best we can.
Yeah, what a blessing to be able to meet those needs. Now, we always hear every year about gold coins dropping. Have we heard about a gold coin yet? And what is it like when it happens?
Well, that's the big tradition, right? I remember doing the news, hey, gold coin discovered in Northbrook yesterday, and we'll take anything we can get. That is for sure. I haven't heard of any yet, and we're early in the season, but we'll let you know as soon as we do. But again, it's not about the big numbers. I mean, if everybody just gave a little, we could make a lot of things happen. So if it's $5, 10, 20, or a gold coin, we can use it all, and we will.
Yeah. We will. What percentage, if you know, of the $12 million that you're hoping, and I know you all will get from the Red Kettle campaign this year, what percentage of the overall budget is that?
Good question. I don't have it in my memory bank right now, but it is a major campaign. There's no question about that, and it's critical. And it seems like most people get it. I mean, it's not like we have to communicate what the Red Kettle is. I think what we need to communicate is where the money goes and how it's impactful for folks, and what kind of a difference it can make in people's lives. But it is a major part of what we do. There's no question about it. And I know everybody at the Salvation Army is excited, and we just want to encourage everybody to get out there and help us out. And when you see the Red Kettle, the one thing I can tell you, and I'm sure you've seen this too, we all are busy in our lives, and we're hustling from one place to the next, and you gotta get to a certain place at a certain time. You're walking down that sidewalk, or maybe you're kind of jogging, and you see that Red Kettle, and I've seen it so many times. People will kind of look your way for a second, and then look away because, I'm late for a meeting. I gotta get to see my daughter. I gotta get to work, whatever it is, or class. And I guess what I'm getting to is it doesn't take but a couple of minutes to dig in that pocket or grab your phone and do the Venmo deal. So please give us that extra minute and try to do just a little something, and it would be most appreciated.
Certainly tugs at the heartstrings. Now, how long is it going on?
This goes all through the holidays. It's underway right now. I mean, you'll see the kettles everywhere. It's really it's such an important part of what we do, and I'm excited. I can't wait to get out there. And to me, that's the exciting part, just to see people. And the one thing I would tell you too, Anita, is so many times, as I mentioned, you see some people, and most folks are like hustling to their next appointment or sales call or whatever it is. But when they do dig in their pocket, grab their phone, or give us a 20 or whatever it is, I could just, you can sense it. It feels good.
Uh-huh.
You know, you can just, and they walk away with a smile on their face, and I always love that. It just makes me feel good about being part of it.
Feels good to be a giver. Okay, now we've got to get in your business here. So first and foremost, we need to know what else you've been doing with your time since retiring from here.
Well, yeah, thank you for asking. Well, this is certainly one element of what I do. I'm also on a couple other boards, the Museum of Broadcast Communications, where we just opened up our new museum at the corner of Randolph and Canal. And that's been fun to be a part of that endeavor. I'm also on the Chicagoland Sports Hall of Fame Board of Directors. We had our big induction ceremony last month, and that's always a blast to be involved in the MC of that every year. Among the inductees this year were Peanut Tillman of the Bears and Ryan Dempster of the Cubs, and that's always fun. And then I also teach at my alma mater, Butler University, of course, for students who aspire to do what you do and what I did.
Well, they are learning from the best.
So, you know, there's a lot going on. I mean, I have to say, it's a blast being retired, but it's also, people always ask me, what are you doing? So I got plenty to do. But I still manage to squeeze in a little time, especially in the mornings, to watch what's going on there at the station. So I'm always happy to see you guys, and that's what you miss. You miss the people, right?
Well, I was going to ask you if you missed the work at all. Maybe it's an obvious answer.
Yeah, sure. You know, and there are big stories that happen, and you say, boy, that'd be something to be a part of that. But, you know, my thinking is every 46 years or so, you ought to kind of switch it around a little bit. So that's what I did. That was my thinking a couple of years ago anyway. And I haven't regretted it. And it's been fun to be able to sort of, Anita, you know, when you're on vacation and you wake up and realize you don't have to hustle into the shower, you don't have to worry about what you got to do today or what the schedule is or what you're wearing or, you know, what time you got, how much time you got before you got to take off. And it's a wonderful thing to like have that sense almost every day. So that I got used to pretty fast.
Oh man, I'm jealous. I'm just sitting here jealous because you mentioned the sport.
One day.
Hopefully one day. Because you mentioned the Sports Hall of Fame, and we know how much you love sports. We do have to ask you before I let you go what your predictions are for the White Sox in the next season.
Gosh, did your producer, Jim Selly,
he may have wanted me to ask that question before I let you go. You know him well.
Yeah, he and I and a bunch of others are big Sox fans. And the answer is that, in fact, I ran into, a little story for you, I ran into Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the White Sox, of course, at that Hall of Fame induction ceremony. And talked just a few minutes with him. And I said, I have to say, for the first time in a few years, I was able to watch the White Sox and generally enjoy them in the second half of this season, this past season. And he laughed and said, yeah, me too, kind of a thing. But for the first time, the fruits of their labor are beginning to come to the front, where you can see some opportunities where some of these young players might be able to be really good players. Now the question is, how soon before it's because you can't count entirely on your kids coming up. You have to also go out and grab free agents and build the team that way. And they haven't shown any signs of wanting to do that yet. But let's hope so, because we need more of what we saw during the second half of the season. So let's hope so.
It was, getting the right talent and maybe a blessing from the Pope.
Yeah, exactly. We'll
Corey,
take that.
So great catching up with you. Everybody, make sure you take part in the Salvation Army's Red Kettle campaign. It's going on throughout the holidays, as he said. Just a wonderful human being, and we miss you around here.
Anita, you're very sweet. Thank you. Sign everybody for me.
Absolutely. They wanted me to give you a hug, but I can only give you a virtual one. So yeah, there we go. Bring it in. Bring it in. You take care. Happy holidays.
You too.
All right, 3:46. We'll be right back. Okay, everyone, it's 3:48 right now, so we just have about 10 more minutes before we turn you over to the 4 o'clock news. Obviously, I wish we could have left on the warm and fuzzy note with Corey McPherron talking about the Salvation Army's Red Kettle campaign, because it's wonderful and we want everyone to take part in it. But we did just get word of a Block Club article that talks about a very important topic here throughout Chicagoland over the last few months, and that is Operation Midway Blitz and some of the litigation connected to it. So I want to go ahead and bring in Andrew Fan with the Invisible Institute to talk about this reporting. I know you're a part of a group of people who worked on this report on federal agents using tear gas and pepper spray, and you found that the feds used chemical weapons on Chicagoans at least 49 times.
Yeah, that's right. I'm part of a group of 6 different newsrooms or 11 different reporters that collaborated together, published today, looking at the use of chemical weapons during Operation Midway Blitz. And yeah, we found 49 uses of tear gas and pepper spray since the 1st of October across Chicago neighborhoods and the suburbs. We didn't look at Broadview, the ICE detention center there, where there've been a lot of other uses involving protesters. But we just focused on what was happening with federal agents while they were doing immigration enforcement across the city.
Yeah, so let's talk about why that time frame is important, because I can remember a court date of October 8th that was as a result of tear gas, a federal court date.
Yeah, that's right. So one thing that happened after the first uses of chemical weapons against protesters, against people in neighborhoods, is that there was a legal effort to restrain federal agents from using these kinds of chemical weapons. And there was a first temporary restraining order, and eventually a couple days ago, like a temporary injunction. So there've been 2 different kind of legal orders that are supposed to restrict their use of these weapons and to prevent them from using them on people who are peacefully protesting.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
One thing that we found is that it's unclear if these legal orders have had the effects that, I think advocates and people who've brought them and others have hoped for. We found that 30 of the 49 uses of tear gas and pepper spray took place after the 1st October court order that you mentioned. Another 4 took place after the second one in November. Also, for reference, we found 49 uses of chemical weapons, primarily against protesters. Chicago police have not used chemical weapons on protesters since 2021, they confirmed to us. So there's a real big difference with how federal agents are kind of operating in the city and policing in the city compared to how, like, Chicago police are, for example.
Yeah, and you know what? That kind of goes back into like Larry Snelling, the superintendent Larry Snelling's words after one particular incident where there was a question of, and really I think in many instances there was a question of what is the line for local police versus the line for federal agents, and how people were kind of thinking it was a little blurred, or, well, they should be acting and they're not, or they're acting and they shouldn't be.
Yeah, we're seeing really complicated situations where I think, you see Chicago police, trying to control crowds or working with crowds outside of really intense scenes. And then in a couple cases, we've seen federal agents basically throwing tear gas from either behind those officers or directly next to them. And I think there's both questions for the department on, like, these are things that if the Chicago police officers standing there were doing them would be against their policies from what we understand. But at the same time, these same officers have often been caught in the tear gas clouds as a result.
Now, one court date I was in when Commander Bovino was summoned to personally arrive in court on that particular date. And the weekend before he was in court, there was this video that had circulated of him actually throwing out the tear gas into the crowd. Now, he says that the tear gas is the most non-lethal means of them dispersing a crowd.
Yeah, I mean, I think we actually have a statement on our reporting from the Chicago police talking about how they have dealt with a wide variety of crowds over the years, since 2021, and they've never had to resort to chemical weapons, according to their own account. So I think you actually see that in a lot of the videos that our reporters reviewed. You see federal agents sometimes escalating situations because they're relying on chemical agents. You're seeing protests that are maybe tense, but ultimately not violent, that become a lot more heated after suddenly everyone in the crowd has been exposed to some kind of tear gas or pepper spray, and it really raises the tension. At the same time, you see oftentimes at these same protests, Chicago police there, without tear gas, without pepper spray, clearly primed, often seemingly kind of controlling the crowd, orienting the crowd, just with their hands, just kind of telling people to move. And it's very striking to see those two approaches to policing side by side, and sometimes in the same video.
Yeah. So who were some of the other people that you all talked to for this report? And what were maybe some of the more surprising findings to you?
Yeah, I mean, we talked to experts on some of the health risks. We talked to someone from Physicians for Human Rights who talked about the fact that there's a reason that there's actually restrictions on chemical agents in a lot of different contexts, because they can be really dangerous to people. There's concerns that they can harm people who might be pregnant. There are concerns that they can just really, if you have asthma or you have any other kinds of health conditions, they can be really dangerous. And we talked to Craig Futterman, who's an attorney, civil rights attorney, who helped negotiate the Chicago police policy around chemical weapons. And again, what we heard is that there's a real reason that Chicago police have such a much more restrictive policy on this. It's you don't want to, if one person in a crowd throws a water bottle, you don't want to punish everyone in that crowd for merely being present, especially if they're exercising their First Amendment rights. There's a real balancing act that the city's policy tries to address, with reserving it for really serious situations where actually, if Chicago police want to use tear gas or pepper spray on a crowd, they have to get the sign off of Larry Snelling or someone that he designates. So it's possible, but it's actually, treated as a very serious decision. And I think we saw that as being really different than how you're seeing federal agents use a lot of this. One other thing that was surprising to me is that actually, as part of the lawsuit and the legal actions that you were referencing, Border Patrol have published some of their own policies around tear gas and pepper spray. And one of the things they're not allowed to do, or their policy seems to restrict, is shooting at drivers, right? Shooting tear gas or pepper spray at people who are operating vehicles, which makes sense, because if you're operating a car moving at pretty high speeds, and you can't see because you've been pepper sprayed, it's really dangerous, not just for you, but for everyone around you. And what we saw is, like, two of the last cases we documented just about a week ago were of agents appearing to fire pepper balls into moving vehicles. So I think we're seeing not just that there's cases that appear to violate, or at least potentially violate, the legal order, but also aren't even adhering to the relatively the limits that these agents actually have, they're supposed to be operating under for their own policies.
Yeah, there was the case with the family that had the 1-year-old in the vehicle. I do remember that. Exactly. Yeah. And, when you talk about the health risks, I remember Mayor Katrina Thompson at Broadview, and again, your reporting goes over other areas other than Broadview, but one of her major concerns from her constituents was that the tear gas or the chemical munitions that were being deployed at the processing center, the ICE processing center there, I mean, you can deploy it on one group of people, but it's still going through the air to the other neighborhoods, and people who have nothing to do with the protests or the activity there end up being affected by it too.
That's right. That was a really consistent theme of talking to people across neighborhoods. We looked at that big protest in Brighton Park on October 4th. And one thing we found was that we've talked to people who were just in their homes, like not in the protests, not involved at all. And their houses were just completely engulfed in tear gas. And so they couldn't leave. They were coughing and they had symptoms for days. And it was just a really scary experience too, to have that happen to you inside your own home when you haven't done anything. We've also talked to someone who helped a couple that they said had been again, like driving through Logan Square when federal agents launched a tear gas canister, and they were just caught in the cloud. And so they had to stop their car, pull over. They couldn't see. Volunteers had to come and help them clean their eyes out. It definitely feels like these effects are really serious, and they're not just affecting. They're concerns about how they affect protesters, but they're also not just affecting protesters. They're affecting people who live in communities, across the city, across Chicagoland.
Yeah. Okay. And how is it? Obviously, as journalists, we all have our deadlines for things. But of course, you look at the fact that, the federal government says Operation Midway Blitz will continue. But this is being published as we are seeing and reporting that agents are being redeployed, and Commander Bavino has left and gone on to North Carolina. So how does it feel to be publishing this at a time when we're seeing that kind of movement in the overall operation?
I think it's a great question. I think that what we're doing, we hope, is going to be helpful for people in other places that are maybe deciding, trying to assess what's going on with these agents, people in North Carolina. We also know that, I think we've talked about as a group how they've talked about, coming back in the spring and doubling down on what they've done over the last few months. So I think this is really important from both those perspectives. I also think that a lot of members of this group, including Block Club, including the Tribe, including the Southside Weekly, have done really good and actually including Fox 32, have done really good day-to-day coverage of the tear gas and chemical weapon uses as they happen. But we also thought it was valuable to take a step back and say, what was the scope of this as far as we can tell? Not just from incident to incident, but how many can we actually document altogether?
Yeah.
And hopefully that.
Live from Chicago, this is Fox 32 News at 4.
Right now at 4, women in high heels, cars circling the block, prostitution taking over one Chicago neighborhood. Tia goes undercover with police to see the reality that residents face.
Governor J.B. Pritzker is in Rome, shaking hands with the Pope. The topics they discuss.
But first, we have breaking news. A man is hit with federal terrorism.